So we all ready?
It was very nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm ready.
You guys ready?
Yes.
All right, good. We're gonna start our workshop portion of the meeting. That's gonna take us to 7:30, at which point we'll start the regular agenda. And for the workshop, Natalie has been kind enough to prepare some updates on the most recent iteration of the parking local law. And I'm not sure if you guys saw it. I forwarded over some of the material that Natalie's going to review. And we'll go through those updates.
Yeah.
Thanks, Natalie.
Great. So I think just picking up, because this is the second time you guys are seeing that the planning board is seeing this proposed kind of local law for parking revisions or revisions to parking regulations. So I think the last time this was discussed with the board was in December of the end of last year. There was recommendations that were made to the city council, and those were all kind of integrated into the law as it currently stands. There's been a number of council meetings and a few public hearings since then, and so there's been some changes that the city council specifically wanted to come back before this board and have them review and discuss. So just to kind of give some background to the changes, this is a memo that I'm showing that went to the city council for their the end of March meeting, and there were some conversations in front of the council, and there was kind of, these are the main revisions that were made, right? I think the discussion started to go around giving more nuanced treatment to different districts within the city of Beacon. So there are some districts within the city of Beacon, like the Central Main Street, the CMS, or the Linkage District, or the Waterfront District, that are inherently more walkable just because of the built form, because of their access to public transit, sidewalks, more interesting things to walk around and see. So they're just generally more walkable neighborhoods, whereas there are some outer districts, many of the GB districts, which we have a few kind of applications before us here tonight, that aren't as well connected to these kind of core areas. So I think the city council wanted to see some slightly different treatment of those areas. And then with that, what was discussed is that we were not maybe ready to fully get rid of parking minimums in those outer districts. We still wanted to have some guidance for the planning board that parking should still fall within some kind of range. So parking minimums were added for those outer districts. But I think the conversation is still ongoing, but focused on that the current proposal still retains the use of parking maximums only within the core districts as a means to facilitate the greater production of residential units within those areas, and to prevent the cost of parking from being passed on to renter households, and to reduce either kind of the process that applicants have to go through when they're renovating an existing building and you physically cannot provide parking on that site, to also providing parking that might not be necessary on site, and therefore increasing kind of the permeable or impermeable surfaces. And then the kind of the bigger recommendation that you're going to see is to combine everything into one table so that it's all streamlined, so that you're not going through the code trying to find various parking regulations. So this is what it looked like originally, right? This table that I'm going through, this was kind of the March iteration of it, that all the uses are there in that far left column. Those are all the uses that are currently in the parking table. And then you see the first two columns are for the core districts, right? This is the CMS, the Linkage District, the Waterfront District. Ignore the CB and the PB because those have now just been changed to transition, right? Because that's the most recent zoning amendment, was to kind of take some of these smaller transition areas and make them their own district. You'll see there that column, no parking minimums on the left-hand side, and then parking minimums on the right, or parking maximums on the right. And then for the outer districts, those are the far two columns, minimums and maximums. I think in reviewing this table, what we realized is that there wasn't so much variation between all of these uses, and it was a little bit of kind of this pseudoscience of parking regulations that you saw them coming out, that some were based on rooms, some were based on seats, some were based on 1,000 square feet, some were 150 square feet. So the next step requested by the council is what got us to this table here, which is a very much kind of reduced and consolidated table. So now, rather than three pages in your code, your parking regulations are one table, right, with kind of general building use groups on the left-hand side, which are residential, lodging, office and non-retail commercial, retail, commercial and personal services, industrial, and then kind of a catch-all for other uses. So this layout was taken from areas in the code that you're probably familiar with, right? The CMS district had something similar to this, the linkage district, where rather than going by each separate use, there was kind of groups of these uses. But we still kind of kept maximums only for the core areas, and then minimums and maximums for the outer districts. We can go through some of the methodology that kind of went into that table and where the minimums or maximums were taken from. Those are outlined on the second page. I just want to say there was a conversation around transitional districts and whether the T district should fall within kind of the core area, or did it make more sense to put them in the outer districts? The reasoning on that, they did ultimately end up in the core districts, and the thought behind that is that they are in close proximity to those things we discussed about that were kind of the defining factors between these two areas, right? One is there's municipal parking available, there's more walkable areas connected to kind of bus lines and train station. And so for that reason, the T got put into the core areas. Also because that transitional aspect that really is kind of characteristic of that zone is already regulated by the use groups that are permitted in that T area, right? The T districts permit a lot fewer commercial uses. They focus mostly on residential, and that's what kind of makes it this transition to the outer residential neighborhoods. So for that, I think we ultimately landed on the T staying in that core area. So this is the...
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
And that is, have there been example criteria kind of added to this as an illustration? So for example, just for a minute talking about residential uses in the transitional, it's one space per dwelling unit, which is similar to what's in the core area.
Yep.
Once you get outside of that, it's 1 to 3, right? So it's a minimum of 1, maximum of 3.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to think for a second, just game out in my head, like what kind of things we might be considering. There are quite a few side streets in Beacon where you have pretty dense residential parking on both sides of the street. And to me, it seems challenging at times to pass other vehicles when you're coming in opposite directions. Or, example of like Tironda, close to Main Street, where it's almost like a game of chicken on long weekends to get down that road if anybody's coming from the opposite direction, because it's a little bit narrow. And I'm just wondering, like, if we're evaluating an application and we're looking at saying, well, should we go for the minimum, just allow require one parking space on a 1 or 2 family dwelling? And then we're thinking, well, is that realistic? Is that going to push some parking out into the street? Is it going to, in the transitional district, is that a potential, flow of residential parking out into the street? Is that going to take up the spaces off Main that visitors are looking for, or people who are coming into Main Street to shop are looking for when things are busy and Main Street parking is kind of filled up? And if we were looking at something like that as part of an application review, is there something we could kind of sink our teeth into and say, well, here's why we want the maximum of 3 spaces on this residential unit? Because this is a comparatively narrow street. There's already parking on both sides. It's getting a little congested. It's in the transitional district. It's close to Main. If there's a situation that this residence gets approved and there's more than 1 car there, it's going to take up parking spaces on the street that would probably be in high demand during weekends or heavy Main Street use times. Or are we going to be, so that's my question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of those have to do, like, the width of no one likes this answer, but you want cars to play chicken going down the street because they drive slower that way, and it's safer for all residents in that area. So that's my one planner thing that I'm gonna just throw in there. But the width of the street and whether there's parking on either side of the street is not impacted by parking minimums in any way, shape, or form, right? I think what you would ask an applicant to look at is, what are you seeing as the utilization rates for that parking that is on the street? Are you seeing there's constantly never spaces there? Are you seeing that there are spaces there? Because it's not a bad thing for cars to be parking on the street for many, many reasons in terms of like urban planning. But I think the other things you would be looking at, you touched on some of them, right? Like proximity to other municipal lots. I think you might be looking at sometimes what the applicant is expecting in terms of like bedroom numbers, right? If there are a bunch of one bedroom units, you guys might treat that differently than if they were all 3 family units. Proximity to the train station, walkability, but I think and this is the hardest part, and this is, I think we'll just keep coming back to this over and over again with parking regulations, because this is really what it comes down to, right? Is that if you provide, and this is what the council has been talking about for a long time, is if you provide free and abundant parking, you incentivize the use of cars, not only creating the space for them, but you also incentivize the use for it.
And I understand that. And
Yeah.
I mean, one thing, I understand the kind of the skinny streets concept in terms of slowing down driving, but I'm not
Yeah.
seeing the judicious driving. I'm
Yeah.
not seeing it happening, the reaction on the part of drivers, not yet at least.
Yeah.
And I mean, and as far as the incentivizing cars, would I like to have like no cars and everybody on bicycles and
I
public
don't think that's
transportation?
possible.
Hell yes, but I didn't get jetpacks either
Yeah.
that I was
Yeah.
promised in
Yeah.
1968. So I mean, like nothing is.
Yeah, but I
just
mean,
think that
it's not, you're
It's not
not,
on the horizon. It's not right on the horizon. There's no way like the death of cars is right on the horizon. I wish
Yeah,
we
I-
could make sweeping changes, but humans have never made sweeping changes except when it comes to like wiping each other out.
I think there's, everything you point to is all the kind of conversation that's gonna happen with the board in terms of why would it fall between 1 space or 3 space. I think what you're creating here is the flexibility that you're not over just because requiring 2 spaces per unit and saying that that is the model that is going to fit every development that happens in this city, right? That's ultimately where I think this legislation is going, is you're giving flexibility to have those conversations and take in all those nuanced urban factors that impact what is the actual real amount of parking that is required for this development to be successful.
Yeah, and I guess to drill down into that a little deeper, Tyrone is a good example of, a scenario where you do have parking on both sides of the street, and it certainly slows traffic down to the degree to which it's basically a one-way street. But a more hypothetical, could be, I don't see much development happening, at least along the creek side, except for maybe where the hardware, not the hardware, but the construction company is. The others are already residential. They're already zoned, they're already
Right,
sort
you
of
could
established.
see
But
redevelopment
a
on-
scenario where, just more of a hypothetical, you've got a street like that, it's known to be congested on weekends when there's parking on both sides of the street. What you're saying is, say there's a development there where we have the option for a max. We may want to opt, knowing the conditions on the street, for the max for that reason. That's kind of what you're driving at, right?
Yes, thank you. And I guess I'm just saying, do we have, will we be able to prevail? Is there enough, do we have enough teeth in the way the rationale is kind of laid out for this?
Can we
that-
enforce a maximum, is what you're
Yeah,
saying?
without,
Yeah.
right.
Well, I'll leave it to the lawyer, but I think the language is written there that it says the planning board shall determine,
Yeah.
based on the information provided,
So it's up to us.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's very much how it's written is for this planning board to set the number, and as long as that number is within the minimum and the maximum, that is the number. I think they could still technically seek a variance from that, could they not?
Yeah, once the planning board sets that number, if the applicant isn't satisfied with it and they want, a different
They have
amount of
some-
parking, they
they
can
have
always
some
seek a
method for
variance
relief.
from that.
The zoning board, yeah.
And obviously, like, the number that you would select would have to have a basis in the record based on, operational characteristics, demand, and all of that.
Yeah. Okay, that answer your question?
There were.
It does. I mean, I don't know if I feel 100% confident, but it does answer my question, thanks.
Okay. And then, so there were just some questions that I think, happy to hear the general comments on them, but I think there was also some questions that the council also did specifically want to ask the board if they had kind of insight or opinions on that. So one of them was looking at what the table currently shows for office and non-retail commercial, and then a separate group, which is retail, commercial, and personal services. I guess the question that came up on that is, are those so different that they need to remain two different groupings, or could they be merged into one group? And so they were left as two different groupings because that's how they currently are in other sections of the code in the CMS district and stuff. But there are other communities, like if you look at Kingston, which everyone's pointing to their code recently for like one of the most recent like overall maximums applied, they just have as commercial and civic uses, right? They kind of group them into one category. So I guess that was one of the questions of whether the planning board thought those should remain separate. And then the other piece that's kind of related to specifics, I think, is in areas like the CMS and the linkage district, which already had these condensed use groups, how was the planning board at that time determining what individual uses fell within which group? Just, that's more of like, I guess for me, for a strategy question in terms of like, do I need to define each of these groups?
Quite honestly, we did that with the express assistance, insight, and expertise of our former planner.
Okay. So I mean, I think what we will probably do is Schedule A of the zoning code kind of has groupings of uses right now. So just so there's no lack of clarity, I think what we'll do is kind of make these groups match those groups so that it's very clear what use falls within.
My sense is that, and I'm sure my fellow board members agree, that to bring clarity to that so that we're tracking back to something within the code, within the tables that we can hang our hats on. Not to say that John was making these distinctions indiscriminately, because obviously there was a rationale, logic behind it. I think it's a component that had me a little bit confounded just in terms of the process. But ultimately, they made sense if we were able to build that sense into the zoning. Okay, that would be helpful. Hopefully, you guys agree.
I think what you're talking about is that for some of these more contentious parking issues that we had to deal with, a lot of that was dealt with administratively. There were meetings amongst the applicants and the reviewers, and they came to us with results of discussion. Now that, I don't know if it necessarily made it simpler, right? Because it was still contentious. It wasn't like everything was resolved and then they brought an agreement to the board. Do you think this is just? It's still the community, I know, and it still was. There was a lot of discussion about it, and I feel like that's a resolved issue, or we're done with it. But so that is a process that will probably continue. That there should be some analysis, right? Yeah. But I do want to have the community and the board, after listening to the community, have the ability to adjust things depending on.
Well, that goes to the third item that the city is asking us to opine on, and that being what metrics could be used to track progress of the proposed parking reform and impacts on desired outcomes. I think it's a very thoughtful question to ask. We ask it, and especially I know Kevin and Len are curious. It's always that one sort of, understanding the law of unintended consequences, right? Because, you never really know what impact these things are going to have in the real world. Yeah. So if there is a way to develop a process for determining whether there's negative impacts or even positive based on these new laws, I think it would be very useful data for us here now and over a period of time. Methodology, that's a different story. I would leave that to the experts.
Yeah. No, I think where the question was coming from is, like, how do we track, there's some fears about what changing the parking regulations will do in terms of our urban environment. And then there's some hopes and some goals of objectives, right? Of increasing the amount of housing, especially the amount of affordable housing. And so it's a hard question. I don't think the council or the city really has an answer to it right now because, like, parking regulations alone are not going to solve the affordable housing issue, right?
Yeah.
It's one piece of this very larger issue that it's like, well, might as well get this out of the way. So is it fair to, can we look at, you know, the amount of affordable housing being produced in the city and say, tie that back? You know, and I think we're struggling to say we could tie that back to parking regulations.
Yeah.
Could you say the amount of, like, based on the amount of housing being produced on a square footage of a parcel, or, I don't know, you know, like what?
That's a hard one, because with anything as broad as that,
Yeah.
you first have to understand what you want to study, right?
Yeah,
You have to
yep.
understand what the focus of the study is.
Yeah.
Because you could go down many paths with, and it could become almost too cumbersome. And then it comes down to just exactly what that methodology is, right?
Yeah.
There,
So I think there's a larger conversation around what the city wants to glean from an analysis. And so that would somewhat design the analysis. And then it's the methodology around the analysis that has to be established. And again, that's more left to, I think, professionals.
Yeah.
and my question would be, what data is collected to date that might be useful if you're looking to do trend analysis? I'm not sure I have a good handle on what we do collect and whether we can
My
look
sense
at
is none.
any traffic data. The second thing I'm
sorry.
just
Keep
going to say
going.
was that we haven't had a ton of Main Street projects where they have accommodated the required parking. I can think of maybe, and I think this may have even been before my time, but across the street from Homespun provided significant parking on the south side of their property, you know, across from the farmer's market,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and part of that is that they were condo, so they were selling those lots, those spaces.
But
That was
and I'm
part of
not,
the
it
business
doesn't,
model,
it doesn't
right.
matter why they did it or
Right.
what, but I'm just saying, like, a lot of the projects that we've reviewed and approved, like, for example, at the corner of Main and Skank, I remember making comments right at the beginning saying that there's no way that you wouldn't be able to build anything on this parcel if we went to enforce the minimum parking.
Well, that's
So-
that's the case with just about every single parcel along Main Street, and I think that's
So we
the
haven't been-
impetus for this
Right, and I agree
whole
with you,
discussion, right?
But we haven't been hamstrung by it to date. Like, can you think of a project that got killed or was like, whittled down to like a, so I
No.
mean, so to try to say, okay, well, what kind of change can we see by instituting this? You would probably see
It's
it
a little bit
more
more
in the
process.
residential areas
Yeah.
or, you know, so that's just,
Yeah. I want to say one thing, is that Cold Spring just started their new parking set of rules, which I found out about when I was confronted with
You
a
had to
series
take
of signs that I could not understand and phone apps that I couldn't get a signal to download and whatever. It was a whole thing. But my point is that there are comparable communities, right, that are doing things like this. And one of the best ways to compare and contrast is to find, because there's so many variables, there's all this math you can do, like a book this thick, or you can just look at the real results from places that are similar to us with New York state laws and our aged infrastructure like we have, and that would be useful.
Yeah, I don't know how long Cold Spring has had theirs implemented, but yeah, I mean, if they're willing to share any, I mean, that's a good thought, if they're willing to share any of their experiences and
There's a number
outcomes.
of towns in the Hudson Valley that are comparables.
Yeah.
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 And
Getting rid of-
Kingston, for that matter.
Yeah.
I had asked a couple of times, though, to date, whether we were going to create a database of what public parking spaces we were kind of assigning to which projects, because we were depending so heavily on, okay, how many spaces are within 500 feet, that I was beginning to worry that we were going to start double counting. So, I mean, that's where we were at. We weren't really crushing things on the basis of minimum parking requirements in any way, shape, or form. Not on that.
Yeah, so I think the thing that's been discussed as much as possible is like keeping a utilization count. So I think we as a board can keep track of where we saying spaces are gonna be assigned, but not all those spaces are gonna materialize every single time. So it's like, you also need the real-time utilization information of, did that materialize? Did we see that here? So I think that's a good point of, if that data's not there, we can keep looking at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big, it could be as big a topic as the city wants it to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So I think the idea is that what we've seen in other comparable cities is that the world does not end when you switch from minimums to maximums, just because, there's still so many reasons for for developments to want to provide the parking that they need for theirs, and there is available municipal surface parking or other options for
Yeah.
folks getting around, especially when you're talking about affordable home, like affordable units where the car ownership is about, 1/3 as often as car ownership in market rate or luxury units, right?
Yeah,
So-
so then, the range, just in terms of the minimum to maximum makes sense,
Yeah,
right? You would sort of intuitively think, well, okay, that gives some flexibility for different types of applications.
yeah.
Um,
So my takeaway is that's a very
It's
big
broad.
topic. It's a broad
Yeah.
topic.
Actually, until you mentioned that, it was more, at least for me, selfish in that, parking has always been one of those parts of every single application just about that is challenging, especially as far as the perception, because yes, there are regulations in place, and we all know that most of the parcels on Main Street can't meet those regulations, so what are the workarounds, right? There's the two different calculations, there's a 68 code, so
Yeah.
it's convoluted,
Yeah.
right? So I think this helps the applicants understand what the regulations are more, to make that part of their submission, I think, hopefully more clear.
Yeah.
And then therefore, our ability to review and tie back to more clear regulations. So for me, it was more about that, but I think also, and one of the major concerns over the years is just that. It's, where you have instances where parking is not available on site, and a reach by an applicant to achieve that parking by saying, I'm going to take so many spaces from here within that, 800 foot, so many spaces from here. And then I think, as Kevin mentioned, tracking how many times we've done that,
Yeah.
right? That's, to
And
me,
how
I
many
think,
cars show up in that space.
right.
Yeah.
So whether that's a counting exercise or,
Yeah.
I have no idea how that would be executed, but just the idea alone of trying to track the impacts of changed zoning is a good one. No idea how you would execute it.
And I like the tables because I have to deal with codes all the time, and I'll tell you, having to interpret legal zoning definitions that
Yeah.
are with various clauses and whatnot is confusing, it's time-consuming.
Yeah, we have
and
better things to do.
Any human can understand a table. It's a simple way to do it, and it's nice for citizens and developers to know. what
Yeah,
it's
it makes Bruce's life easier too,
Yeah.
because he gets fewer calls and fewer calls for referee.
Figuring
right?
it out. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, I think this is great. What's the next step as far as this law?
So right now, we are putting this into, we're cleaning up the official kind of local law regulations, and I think the city council has another public hearing on that on Monday, on this. So this most recent draft will include this, and then this also, since there has been changes, does have to go back to the county one more time for municipal review and comment that way. And
So there's those three things that we need to somehow translate in English language back to the council. One being, should the table be further condensed to have office and non-retail commercial and retail commercial and personal service as one group, since the parking requirements are similar. And I think what I heard you say is that your recommendation is to keep it the same for now, to keep it as it is for now?
I don't have a looking at them and looking what the proposed numbers are, they are quite similar. So I don't necessarily know if there is a reason to keep it separate.
My thinking
Yeah.
is if to combine them makes it less easy to understand just from the reader and the person trying to interpret, then no.
Okay.
One of the
But if
things
if it's all the same,
Yeah.
then it doesn't have an impact. So I think it should be considered from the standpoint of the user, the
Yeah.
applicant, the applicant's consultants, and whether, in reading it, it's easy to understand how to apply it.
And having a category that only exists in one section, right?
Yeah.
Is actually more confusing
Yeah.
because you're like, what, is that
That's
defined
why,
differently?
that's why I mentioned
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think maybe it's more the alignment with the use table with
Make it-
Schedule A.
Make it simple
Yes.
and consistent, even if you have one extra column, you know?
Okay.
Totally with you there.
Yeah, okay.
And even if you have to, and I know one of the exercises that John did was eliminate as many of the asterisks and subletters and subnumbers as possible,
Yeah.
because that was just a mess.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
even if you have to have really concise, a few of those as explanatory devices, that's fine.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's a real answer for
No, that's a
them,
real
but-
answer. That's helpful. Yep.
And then we talked about in areas like CMS and Linkage District, which already have condensed parking
I
use
think we
groups.
kind of answered that
We
question
answered
through the
that
same
one.
thing. Yeah.
And then what metrics could be used to track progress? I think the answer from the board is,
Yeah. With
We
a little
spend-
bit, with a little bit of where, where developers intend to use parking, and then maybe some way trying to figure out how to look at whether if that gets used, and that we're not double counting parking spaces kind of being used. They're not gonna be assigned, right? So I wanna make that
Yeah.
very clear, like, it's not they don't get 5 spaces in this lot, but if they say, that's where we think it will be provided, trying to figure out a way to.
yeah, I think that's a start.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
that's one area where, because, and again, I remember just about every single time we've done this, either Kevin or Len have the foresight to say, are we keeping track of this?
Mm-hmm,
And I don't think we have been. So if there is a means for doing so,
Oh, I love an Excel sheet, we can keep track of that.
love a good pivot table. Okay, great, thank you. So that completes our workshop session. So we will go to our regular meeting. Welcome, everybody, to the April 2024 meeting of the City of Beacon Planning Board. Our first order of business is to act on the March minutes. Are there any acknowledgement of changes, revisions, or any other?
I sent a couple
Comments?
non-substantive changes
Okay.
earlier today.
Non-substantive then?
Yeah, just
Um,
clarifying language.
Okay. So with that, can I have a motion to approve March's meeting minutes?
Motion?
Motion by Kevin,
Seconded.
second by Len, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, so we will go to, so I will just mention to all the applicants here, if you haven't noticed, we are just a quorum at the moment. So we can certainly act, we just want to make sure you're aware of the fact that your odds are slimmer. So you have the option of asking us, if we act on anything for you tonight, to either take a straw poll and then hold it over, or roll the dice.
Yeah. No, we weren't going to ask for anything, other than you can open and close a public hearing, though, right?
We certainly can. I think that one shouldn't be contentious. So I just wanted to make every applicant here aware of that.
Yep, that's
So,
fine.
Good evening.
Good evening.
First item on the agenda, which is the public hearing of application for amended site plan approval, 11 Maribel Lane, submitted by Maribel of Beacon LLC. And to that point, our first order of business here is to accept a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion?
Motion by Kevin,
Seconded.
second by Len, all in favor? Aye. See, that was easy.
Great. All right, we're off to a good start.
Good.
I'm Ed Kellogg with Maribel Beacon. If you'd like me to, I can walk through the presentation that David Boyce did, our architect, at the last meeting, for the public's benefit, or
For the,
whatever you like.
in a concise and succinct
Yeah,
manner, for the
okay.
public's benefit, yes, please.
Yep, okay. Yeah, the main purpose of amending the site plan, there's significant cost considerations. We also wanted to soften up the site plan, which is why we have some areas not paved. But we're also keeping the dining wing, which is really a combination of cost considerations, but also we're complete with our New York State process with SHPO for the historic restoration, and we're now dealing with the feds. And they very much like the fact that we're keeping the existing dining wing in place because it's less of a visual impact looking from the south. So those are the reasons that we amended the plan. But Mike, if you can go to the next slide. This was the plan that was approved in, I don't know if we have a pointer, in November or December of '22. And the substantial difference is really just the dining wing, which used to be called the Grotto Wing, which is off of the south west side of the mansion. If you can get the cursor over there. And then the amended plan is really the same layout for the mansion, the chateau, parking, and all we've done is kept the dining wing so it's much smaller. Mike? Yep, this is the front elevation that was approved and the rear elevation back in December of '22. And you can see on the left-hand side is the white with the green roof is where the dining wing was, and the grotto rooms underneath. In the middle of the site, there's a connector that goes between the mansion and the chateau, which was enclosed on the lower level and open on the upper level. And next, Mike. On the left-hand side is the new dining banquet room, and that's actually smaller, and we've turned it 90 degrees. And the grotto rooms are have been transferred to other spaces in the complex. And then the connector between the two buildings will only be a main floor connector, open air, and it'll just be open on the lower level. Mike? The front facade is substantially, and this is looking at the chateau from 9D. That hasn't changed. It's looking at the chateau from within the site, and that hasn't changed. So this is 2022. Then go to the next one, Mike. Substantially the same. The heights haven't changed. Next, Mike. Yep. This is interior, so if you're standing at the porch of the mansion looking south onto the gardens, you'll see the dining wing on the right-hand side. And what we've done is kept the terrace. The terrace is kind of where the pool is right now. Go to the next one, Mike. And then this is the open terrace. On the right is dining, also much smaller. Next, Mike. This is the view from the south looking back at the mansion, and the grotto rooms are in the center of the rendering with the banquet above. Next, Mike. And then this is the current amended plan, which doesn't have the rooms. The mansion doesn't change. It actually opens up the view of the mansion and the banquet facilities on the left. Next, Mike. The view from the entrance and the view from 9D and the landscaping, and nothing has changed. This is approved in '22. And this was approved in '22. Approved in '22. You can go to the next, Mike. This is the overall master plan. Again, not any really significant changes. You know, we'll go to, this is what we submitted back in February, and I have to apologize, we were flip-flopping on the sewer, and the last time I was in front of you, I said that we were going to stick with the 2022 approved sewer layout, which went through the middle of the 17-acre parcel. After that, we spoke to the county. The county made a commitment to review our project quickly. I mean, sometimes they take months and months. And we actually, today, we have a sign-off from them with a couple of plan tweaking. Then we'll have their full approval. And it's just, I think there's a CAD layering issue and some other layering. So we're done with the county. So we are going to go on Gatehouse Lane. That is the least impactful to the site. It's less work out on Grandview, but that's the plan that we're going with, and that's what the county signed off on this morning. Next, Mike. Yeah, this is the close-up of the north end of the site. Yeah, there's really not, you know, again, we're going to keep, we would like to keep Maribel Lane from Cottage 3 down to Grandview as gravel. And we would like to keep the parking areas on the west side of the project, which are mostly employee parking, gravel as well. You know, we'd like to keep that as long as possible. We're going to have to maintain it. It has to be comfortable for our guests and for our employees. It has to be well maintained. Then if we find that it's too difficult to do that, then we will pave it in accordance with the plan. Next, Mike. Planting plan, you know, nothing's changed. Yeah. In the middle of the site, we've reduced the number of Monet garden ponds from 4 to 2 from the approved plan. Again, SHPO loved that idea because they wanted to keep the bowl as close to original as possible. Okay, Mike? That's it. The new information we submitted, if you want to go ahead, Mike, we submitted an elevation of the west side of the dining wing. Not much to see here. Nothing's changed at the mansion. There's an exterior elevator, exterior walk-in cooler, emergency generator, and a transformer, and all of those exterior improvements are surrounded by an 8-foot wooden fence. And that detail matches the dumpster enclosures that we have elsewhere on the site. And then, Mike, the grading utility, the county is also fine with the relocation or the changes to the water line on the east side of the chateau, where we changed the entrance going into the building. This is hard to see, but if you can follow the cursor, there's a line right there. You know, we come in off the street, go into the building, then we head south in the parking lot, and it terminates at a fire hydrant there. And I think it's hard to see here, but John had comments about the geothermal wells. So the geothermal wells, in Rhinebeck, we have 28 geothermal wells. They're 400 feet deep. The top of the wells are anywhere from 4 to 6 feet below grade, and they tie together in a manifold and head into the building, which is pretty much the same design here. So there was a couple of manholes, I think, that were close, or maybe it was a light pole, but you know, we've coordinated the location of the wells with the utility improvements. And there's one well field on the parking lot running along the chateau, and the second one is on the closest western lot. And we've done test wells for both of those. They'll probably be in the 300-foot range, 350 feet deep, and I think we're going to have 70 of them. In terms of plans, I think that's it for the most part. Yeah, we covered most of it last time.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, with just one thing about the sewer easement, we're already working on that. We're going to modify the easement description within that subdivision parcel, but not change the subdivision parcel. So we are going to get the county to re-sign a plat, and then obviously Chairman Gunn to re-sign a plat. So we'll document that as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Before we go to the public, we'll just highlight some comments, which
Yep.
obviously you've seen based on our planner and engineers reviews.
Right.
Just kind of walk through some of those. And then field any other questions or notes from my fellow board members. Just as a note, I'm sure you're going to mention some of these architectural modifications need certificate of appropriateness. So that's, instead of going all the way again to architectural review, we'll discuss those this evening. So with that, I'll go to Natalie.
Yeah, I'll start by reading from last month. This project went through months of review under the previous approval, so I kind of focused this review on changes.
Yep.
And so I think one of the big points that still remains true is a lot of focus was placed on this project and design from the main roadway and how this, in terms of landscaping, impacts the mansion. So, I think the point of my review is that there's been no changes or minimal changes to that view that was very significantly kind of reviewed and analyzed through the last iteration. Thank you, sorry. And so there hasn't been any changes to that significant view shed. So the 2 points that remain, I think, were the one that you just pointed out, is that there are minor changes on the one facade that I think this board should decide if that requires a recertificate or if it's insubstantial, the changes. And then the other one was a very simple cleanup of, there's red points of like what the changes are in this site plan, and
Right.
they were just misnumbered, which I already talked to the engineer and we've cleared that up. So that's gonna just be, just making sure that there's a new dumpster enclosure that wasn't properly numbered compared to the note, so just cleaning that up.
Yep.
So I didn't have any significant comments for the board except for
Thank you.
that elevation.
Great. Wow, you don't miss a thing, do you? Numbering order. Wow, that's
Well, I told you, I focused on
Yeah.
changes, so I looked through that intently, yeah.
great. John?
So as Mr. Kellogg said, they have received a letter from the Dutchess County Department of Health.
Yep.
Basically, 2 minor comments that they need to be addressed, and then the Department of Health will recommend the plans for water and sewer for approval. A performance bond has still not been posted for the public improvements, and that was required in the original resolution.
Right. Yeah, we overlooked that. I mean, there's no question. And then, since then, the plan was signed and the permit was issued. So we're fully committed to place the performance bonds. The only thing that we ask, logistically, the work out on Grandview will be done in June and July. The work on 9D will be done next May and June. So if we were to post a performance bond for the 9D work now, it would expire before we started work. And typically, we do it before we start the work. And I understand it was a condition, and I know it's that John wants a condition again, but it's a logistical issue. Yeah, it's not really a question of cost, it's just it will expire, we'll have to buy another one.
Would there be any objection by the city to separating the bonds based on timing, or?
I think the question is more of a sort of a housekeeping administrative question. I understand the concern, you're paying premiums on that bond
Yep.
while you're not scheduled to do the work for many months. But we need to make sure that there are sufficient checkpoints, which is typically why we require those bonds to be posted either prior to the issuance of, prior to you signing a plan,
Yep.
prior to the issuance of a permit, so that the building department has sort of I call it a backstop,
Sure.
a checkpoint at which to make sure that that guarantee is properly posted with the city.
Yeah, and I understand that. I mean, we don't, Dan and I have talked about, we don't know what that other checkpoint might be. The one in the resolution from 22, it's crystal clear. But that's just something, I don't know if we don't have to decide it tonight, but it's just something that we want to put on the table to consider.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're about to authorize draft of another resolution for approval, this particular application, so that may be the mechanism. I don't know.
I don't know
Yeah,
if there's
it's-
something with Bruce's office, that can be tied to some action by the building department. So I'm just not sure. We've been scratching our heads.
Looks like Bruce has some choice words for
Yeah,
you.
we've already missed it, so you already got your plan signed by the chairman, and, it was overseen because of the change in staff in my office. Now we're to a point where, there's no trigger that's gonna come up,
Right.
prior to the start of the road work, for us to do that. There's really no, we don't wanna miss it again, that's the
Right.
problem.
Yep. Yeah, neither do we. Yeah.
Yeah, and, I was under the understanding we were gonna have it today, but I guess we're not gonna have it today. They were
Yeah.
supposed to
Well, we
bring it
just-
to our office.
We looked at our schedule and it just, Grandview is easy, but it's just the 9D work, We just want to get as much activity on the site done before we go out. Because if we did 9D like now, it's just going to get trashed, There's just going to be too much activity and we'll be restriping and, so I don't know. I understand.
Can you do me a favor then provide me with the construction schedule for the entire project?
Uh-huh.
I can review it prior to the next meeting.
Okay.
And then I'll make a recommendation to the, to the board at that point when I have everything
Okay.
to go by.
Yep, all right, fair enough.
See what we can do from there.
Okay, thanks.
Jennifer, some other things to think about on that is they're going to need a road opening permit.
Yeah.
So we may be able to tie it to that permit requirement before they do any work out there.
Yeah, again, it's all a matter of making sure that whoever's issuing that road opening permit is going to be checking the planning board's resolution to make
Right.
sure that that guarantee gets posted prior to the issuance of that permit, because again, then it's, it's
Yep.
a missed opportunity again.
And who issues that? I mean, Creighton Manning? I mean, Creighton Manning is overseeing the
No.
design,
No.
but,
It's
That
the
would be issued by,
highway
I
department.
can't recall, I think that part is under control by the city.
By the
if I
city.
recall, so it would be
Right.
the city of Beacon, so it'd be the highway department and building department
okay,
combined, or?
Yeah, right now, it's just the highway department. will
Okay.
issue it. So, yeah, they're not gonna be checking with us. But I think, isn't there gonna be a road opening permit taken out soon anyway, because you have to disconnect some water lines?
yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to do, on 9D, yeah, on both, we're gonna have to do that,
Right.
yeah,
So if that's taken out, you still need to post a bond for that work
right,
regardless.
right.
Right.
Yeah, that's a wet tap and, you know, kind of a short run, but, yeah, so there's gonna be a few permits.
Okay, so I think that sounds like a good solution, Bruce,
Yeah.
to, share your sequencing.
Yep,
And then you
okay.
can kind of make recommendations of tying the sequencing and the sort of relative value of that work
Okay,
to the bond, and then you'll make the recommendation to the city on how to codify that. Okay,
okay,
that seems fair.
As far as the existing conditions plan, since the subdivision plat was filed, the existing conditions plan should show Lot 2 on it. Right now, it doesn't show that lot as
Okay.
existing.
yep,
Note number 5 on the plans says defer the western employee lots paving and provide gravel lots, but it doesn't tell me when you're deferring to. It's just very open-ended.
right, yeah. We're not exactly sure, it's really gonna be, again, it's gonna be our guests and our employees and how well, it's being maintained. Obviously, we're going to maintain it. And how long that might, it's a little bit weather dependent, I don't know if we're gonna get torrential rains, but,
Is your concern that you'd rather see it paved and the gravel is a reasonably acceptable interim? Or, because on the one hand, yes, I mean, gravel surfaces are really hard to maintain, especially in the winter when you have to plow them.
yeah, we
But-
did that for two reasons. We did it for cost, but we also did it, we just wanted to, 150 years ago, 160 years ago, there was no hard surfaces.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to try to have some of the site, back to that.
Yeah, I mean,
And
from
just
the
soften it up a
perspective
little
of impermeable surfaces, it's advantageous, I think, to have them gravel.
Right.
So I'm just curious, your concern, John.
That it's just being left open-ended as far as a time frame. We're deferring something, but
I
to
understand.
when?
Would it be,
I mean, I think they need to define further in that note as until certain conditions arise, or,
Either that or leave
Okay.
it as what's
Leave it-
being
just leave it as
proposed now
gravel.
is it until you come back to make a modification to amend the site plan to change the surfacing at some point in the future, whenever that may be.
I mean, they have the stormwater already set up as if it was paved.
Yeah.
And they account for that.
yep. Yeah, so it's either, to John's point, don't leave it open-ended, or to Jennifer's point, if it's gonna be gravel, just leave it gravel.
Yeah,
And we hope to be able to believe you that you're gonna maintain it. I
Yeah.
mean,
sure.
This is
yeah.
a premier sounding facility, so I imagine you would.
I mean, do you want to put a decision trigger in there that says, like, we're going to go with gravel for 2 years, and then we're going to evaluate how it performed, and we're either going to decide to keep it or throw up our hands and pave it? I mean, that's essentially, that's what you've been saying, you just haven't put a kind of time horizon on
Yeah.
that decision.
Yeah, we could put a time, I mean, that's a good idea. We could put a time frame on, from opening date, that in 2 years, we have to come back before you.
It'll be 2
Something
years,
like that.
5 years. I mean, you're gonna know best.
Yeah.
You're evaluating what's working for you and how well it's being maintained.
Yeah, it may be working great, and it may be easy to maintain, and you're golden.
Yeah.
You never have to convert to paving.
Okay,
Um,
all right, we'll propose a time frame.
Yep.
Okay,
The walks that you have going from the ADA accessible parking stalls to the east side of the mansion, you're noting them to be stone dust. I can see that being problematic during winter months, trying to maintain those and people trying to use those paths, and also during rain events, especially heavy rain events, and somebody, if they're in a wheelchair trying to get through that.
Right. Yeah, I'll let Mike answer that. He has more detail for the ADA compliance. We've discussed that with Henry Thomas, our landscape architect. I mean, just as a matter of what happens on a daily operational basis, you know, again, in Rhinebeck or other facilities, people drive up to the front door, you know, if they're handicapped. If they're in a walker and they're in a wheelchair, you know, and then whoever their host is goes back and parks the car. So it hasn't been an issue. Also, there's internal, like if you come into the front desk and you end up going over to your room, you're going to go across the walkway on a hard surface. But yeah, I understand. We actually have stone dust in our Plymouth facility, and there's like 10 or 15 parking spaces, and that's how everybody enters on stone dust.
Yeah, I mean, I know stone dust is more compacted than gravel. Gravel would be almost impossible and probably not
Right.
practical at all for wheelchairs, but yeah, I think I agree with you. It all comes down to maintenance. And to your point, sure, if the more convenient, accessible entry is at the, you know, paved area, that's going to be used. But if
Right.
it's in my view, if it's a required accessible path, it's the same, meaning there is no distinction. It's required, it needs to be accessible, it needs to be accessible in a way that's convenient. So in your experience, you're describing stone dust is easy to maintain so that it is still accessible,
It's still, yeah, I'll let Mike
but yeah,
talk about specifics.
Well, we're sort of following, you know, the same details that are, you know, put forth to the Greenway Trail, you know, for ADA accessibility. It's not necessarily a surface that, you know, can't be compacted by travel, wheels, and so forth, so it does require more maintenance than a paved surface. But we feel it's sufficient for ADA access with proper maintenance. I think we're referring to ADA 302.1, and I'll just quote, "A stable surface is one that remains unchanged by contaminants or applied force. So when the contaminant or force is removed, the surface returns to its original condition," which is the condition of a properly constructed stone dust path. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't need maintenance maybe every year, after every winter, but that's the intent.
Yeah.
If the board is okay with that, that's what we would like to go with.
Well, I understand John's highlighting that, right? Accessibility is extremely important. Obviously, you know that. If it's not ultimately accessible, you're the ones exposed. You know that, right?
Yeah.
So if you're technically following the letter of the law, and you're comfortable knowing that you're exposing yourself if you're not maintaining or if those conditions change, I encounter this every day in my business. That's your decision. That's my position. Any other
Well,
thoughts?
I just know that in hospitality, that it's common, ADA compliance is a big issue, and it's actually not covered by the letter of the code. A lot of it has to do with precedent and the legal
Yeah, it's
case history.
ANSI 114, right?
Right, but there's also like case law that happens. There are people that come through hotels
Sure.
to ensure ADA
Yeah,
compatibility.
just watch out for the
Part of the
VA.
business. And so what I'm saying is that you will self-regulate as far as accessibility, as far as I know.
Yeah, we won't take that risk. It's just in every square foot of the building, you know, not just on the pathways.
Yep. Thank you. Anything else?
I just had a few other cleanup comments that they'll be able to take care of.
Most of it's, yeah, just drawing stuff, right?
Yeah, and one comment on the SWIP.
Any other questions for the planner or the engineer on their comments?
No, just one item that John forwarded to us that came from the public. I don't know if you want me to
Yes,
address
is
that
this
now.
the gentleman, Matt George?
At the north end of the site.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
walking path.
so in October of '22, this was brought up, where we had the walking trails that start up by the mansion, then end up down by the ponds, and it was in 30 feet of the property line.
Yep.
The north property line. We moved it, so now it's 110 feet away, and we eliminated about 200 feet. So where the trails are right now is significantly higher, 25 or 30 feet higher than the property line.
So in his note, he referenced this diagram.
Yeah, I saw that.
You're
Yeah.
saying where he's highlighted in green, that's now
That's now,
well past the parking lot?
yeah, it's 110 feet from the property line.
Got it. Okay.
And then it meanders down the hill. Yeah, if you want to show. Oh, right here.
Oh, he's got it right there.
Yeah, so that was the original plan.
That's the old one.
Right.
And you moved it to,
And this is the new one.
oh, he was highlighting the new one.
So it's quite a ways away.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's much further than the original, but it's still, what are you saying, 150 feet?
It's 110 feet away.
110 feet.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's significantly higher, I mean, well above, what the property line is. I mean, you could build a 10-foot high fence.
Yeah, I mean, the
And
contours
it
here.
doesn't, because you're going to see people walking up on the hill.
I don't know which direction the contours are going, but are you going up it? That's pretty steep. Either going up in this direction or down in that?
Down,
direction?
going down,
Yeah.
yeah.
What, they're going
It's-
what? That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Down to the north.
Oh, down to,
Yeah,
the-
it's not an
down.
I mean, some
to
of the
plain
trails are level, some are a little, take some more work to walk, but it's just well above it and far away from the property line.
Yep. That's the depth of almost an entire parcel. One of these standard 50 by 150.
But what you're saying is that because of that change in grade, people walking on that trail are going to be visible from any of these yards, no matter
Yes,
where
it's
you-
just people. I
where you
mean,
put it.
it's
Right.
not ATVs, just people who are walking up there.
And we also have,
And they eventually connect down to the Greenway Trail, so we have the whole Greenway Trail
Yeah.
going
we
along
have that situation
the creek.
up and down Mount Beacon, where the Scenic Hudson Trail goes behind people's yards, so this
Yeah.
is not the only,
And look, it's
Please.
akin to, having guests over and having them walk around your backyard, as long as they're
Yeah.
well behaved.
Right.
Okay, so thank you for acknowledging
Okay.
that element of the public comment. Just before we go to the public proper,
mosquitoes.
anything else, fellow board members, you'd like to add? Questions, comments? We'll come back to the architectural review once we talk to public. Anyone from the public here want to share their thoughts? You're welcome to step to the microphone, state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Karen Frittleman. Live on Melzinger Road, Dam Road. And my question is, in terms of the landscaping, I just wonder if there is, and this may not be an issue for this evening's discussion, but if there is any overview of the actual, the way that the trees are being cut down, because a lot of trees have been cut down. That was a, as you probably know, historic site.
Yep.
In terms of the landscaping. And as you also know, our forests in the region are being hit pretty hard by gypsy moths. We're in a pretty difficult situation. So my question is, is there oversight on how this land is being developed?
Indeed.
And
It's a
that's my
very good question. We usually don't do Q&A here, and I'll answer this briefly. Natalie mentioned the almost years that this application has been under review, and if you happen to track that entire process, and again, all of this is publicly recorded, public material available online, And I'll ask because what I'm getting to is that the applicant and the board have spent a significant amount of time on any number of issues, including just what you described, to the degree to which I can convey that the applicant and their landscape consultant, landscape expert, including expert arborists, if I've got this correct, did a absolutely complete and full inventory that's been cataloged and documented of the existing species, as well as indicated the cleanup. There's a certain degree of cleanup, meaning dead and either non-viable or alive and not going to last much longer components that are needing to be removed. So there's quite a bit of preservation and, to my observation, quite a bit of care around the historic nature of quite a bit of the actual legacy species on site, as well as the new plantings. And again, Natalie referenced the amount of time the board has spent in the past with this applicant, understanding just that relative to the views, especially from 9D. So to that degree, yes, there's been quite a bit of work that the applicant has put in, that the board has reviewed. It's short of going into all of that detail here for you. It's all available. And, you know, I'm not sure if the applicant be willing, but they're here if you want to ask them. So hopefully that helps. So anyone else from the public? If you could step to the microphone. Yeah, we need you.
I'm here for the Tyrone.
Oh, okay.
Support what you said.
What's your name and address,
My
please?
name is Judith Tulloch, and one of the most beautiful parts
What's your
about
address, please?
Beacon
Hi.
is
Sorry, for the record, your address.
69 Phillips Street.
Thank you.
One of the most beautiful parts about Beacon, and why a lot of people have moved here and want to be here, is the nature. And we've all seen so many trees go. There's the wildlife, there's no place for them. And we just hope that everybody that's building will please take that into consideration, because if we wind up just having a beautiful artsy Main Street and just a bunch of buildings without the nature, we're going to lose everybody. So we need to please keep as many trees saved as that we possibly can, and wooded areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Wow. That's showing wonderful restraint. Thank you, Teresa. Anyone else? If not, then we'll consider a motion to close the public hearing. Thoughts?
Motion?
Motion by Kevin.
Seconded.
Second by Len. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, then with that, we can also, let's talk architectural review. If you could give us a hand and just highlight those specific areas that we've reviewed this, but we want to just kind of track it in order.
Yep.
Those
Okay.
specific areas of the building that you've changed, and each one of them we'll just sort of take under discussion, if you don't mind.
Okay.
We're going to do that here,
Sure.
in real
Yeah,
time.
Might go back to the renderings?
Is that all right with you guys? Yep.
Sounds good, thank you.
Well, that's one of them, yeah. So on this side, the bubble on the right-hand side, we've changed the banquet room. And the banquet room primarily ran north and south. Now it runs east and west, and it's smaller. So this is the elevation looking on the west side. You're actually kind of on the other side of the gully. And what we added here from a year and a half ago was there's an exterior elevator and an exterior walk-in cooler and walk-in freezer. So that's it, looking at this one,
Yeah, go ahead.
okay?
And remind me if I'm not remembering this correctly, but I recall we had some discussions about the materials on the dining wing the first time around. Could you kind of just go through and recap for us what the materials are gonna be, whether anything has changed and just, do you recall that?
Yeah, the materials are all shown on the bottom of the elevations right here. We haven't changed any materials at all. It's mostly stone veneers. It's all, completely in compliance with the city code.
So all
So we haven't
materials,
changed any of that.
all materials we've previously approved as part of the earlier architectural review.
Right,
Yep.
yep.
Any other thoughts around the
And
board on
then
the?
this,
Yep. Go
yeah,
ahead.
so this is the new elevation, which opens up some of the view to the mansion from the south. It also has an open connector that goes from the mansion over to the chateau. And then we've relocated the 7 rooms that we used to call grotto rooms, which is now where that lawn area is. So that's the south elevation difference.
Can you show the rendering again from the new rendering?
The, the big perspective, the artistic one? Yeah.
Yes, please. I mean, and I think in general, my reaction to it was that it's pleasing. I like the idea of the grotto rooms, but the render, the view that's envisioned with them removed is very kind of clean and it's
Yeah, it's a lot
pleasant.
softer. There was a lot of stone in there. So Mike, if you go to the, not the elevations, but the renderings. It's the end of this presentation. Right here. So this is looking from the porch of the mansion, looking south. Then go to the next one, Mike. That was the approved elevation. Then this is new, again, from the porch looking south. Then next, Mike.
The drawing notes that metal roofing is just that metal roofing with a copper fascia, and the rendering indicates that that's patinaed copper. That roof, what metal is it?
The actual metal,
Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly.
okay. That would be
The
helpful.
actual, whether it's aluminum or, it's not copper.
Yeah, so that green roof, yeah.
Yeah, Mike, is that identified on the previous plan?
Because if that's just a shop painted green brake metal roof, it could look really kind of non-pleasing.
Yeah, I can't recall exactly what that was.
It'd be good to, if it's not already part of your submission.
Yeah, we submitted hard samples, I thought.
So I see this, the metal roofing, but it doesn't indicate, also the
type
note
of
says
metal?
metal roofing, it doesn't say what kind of metal.
Yep.
And whether it's pre-finished or whether it's left to patina, what's going on? Because that's going to be a visible element.
Right, it's the same thing as, it's identical to what we had before. It's just we just turned it.
Okay, and you don't remember what it was? What
No,
it
I
was
don't.
that was approved? Yeah, if you could, in the space of time we have, figure out what it is so that we can understand it, or otherwise we're going to have to ask you to come back.
Okay.
And,
I
you'll
can
be
go
back,
out and- I
you'll be
can go out
back
and
next
call our
month
architect.
anyway, if you're okay with us
Yeah,
kind
we're
of
okay.
continuing this. So if you don't have it now, then, come back
Okay.
with it with some clarity next month. But yeah, okay.
This is the elevation that Len asked about, so where that big lawn area is,
Yeah,
is where the grotto rooms used to be.
Yeah, the last rendering that you showed before we jumped to the roofing material was the one that, that one, thank you.
yeah, no, I
Yeah,
see this.
it does look a lot cleaner. I think I understand why you're describing that SHPO was preferring this as less, it's not so busy around the view of the existing mansion.
Yeah, no, I see it as an improvement. Question, on any of these new, or any of the roofs actually, I'm sure, hopefully, my colleagues covered it in the previous architectural review, but are you proposing any, I see this kitchen fan, but any other mechanical equipment on roofs as part of this application. And I raise this because it seems like, and I'm not aiming this at you, but it's two specific examples that I won't name by name. But mechanical equipment ending up on roofs that we talk about with the applicants, and they promise that they're going to screen them, and then the screening is either missing or it's not screening anything at all.
Right.
So, not to then, make you the sort of focus, it's just one of these things that people tend to forget about, and it really grates on you because,
Yeah,
so.
there's nothing on the chateau and there's nothing on the mansion. The only thing on the dining wing is some kitchen equipment that is on the west side of the dining wing.
Is that this
So you
exhaust
would-
fan?
That is, there's going to be an exhaust fan up there, and then an energy recovery unit.
Okay.
And it's kind of, you see where the tower is. Mike, if you could point to the tower of the elevator. It's right adjacent to that, but you can only see it if you're on this side, and you can only see it if you're in the second and third floor mansion rooms.
Can you leave us with some sense of confidence that that is in fact the case?
Yes. Yeah, I can commit to it now. Yeah, you won't see it.
Well, in some more sort of material way? We don't want to see this equipment. And so, and that's exactly my point.
So what we can do is, Mike, if you go to go to the renderings.
And I will say again, you're sort of now the focus of this. With all due respect, your word's not enough.
Yeah, no, I
Because
understand.
We've had
that's all
that
right.
in the past. I
Yeah.
appreciate your patience
Yeah.
with us.
Yeah, then the previous one, Mike, like where the terrace is, keep on going. Yeah, or no, one more forward, one forward. Yeah, so we could take, if you're looking, this is looking south, we can look at the terrace from the east. So if you're like at the connector,
Yep.
and then looking back.
Yeah.
So you're looking directly west, and then that,
It
we can
doesn't-
show
yeah.
that the equipment won't be visible.
It doesn't need to be a glossy. It doesn't need to be a rendering like this, because again, there are many times when we see wonderful, glossy, beautiful renderings that, they're just that. They're part of the iterative process, right?
Right.
The reality doesn't reflect the rendering. You ever work with the Landmarks Preservation Commission in New York City?
No,
So simple
I'm a
line
lucky
di-
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Simple line diagram that represents, the view from certain vistas, simple.
Yeah,
That equipment and what those line angled views
Okay.
are would be extremely helpful.
okay.
And to your
Yeah.
benefit as well.
No, we've done those before. I understand exactly what you're talking about.
So, yeah, so
Okay.
that would be well appreciated. Great, so we talked about the replacement of the grotto rooms. There's the material, and then the broader question of mechanical equipment and lines of sight. What next as far as modifications, architectural? That's it.
What's that?
Great,
Yeah.
okay. Any other thoughts, board, on these modifications, either for the applicant to take away and further develop, as we discussed with those two items, or just general observations?
Well, the main impact of the changes is an area that's sort of back of house, right? It's
Right.
all the service areas that you don't want to have be part of the experience of the guests in any
Right.
case, right? So that's, and that you have fencing, there's other things that I'm not that concerned about that elevation specifically that you provided, just that you've accommodated it and you understand how it's going to affect, your guests, views and other things like that. It's not going to be that visible from the street, which is part of what I think the big interest that the community has, right? Is
Right.
just seeing this beautiful building all renovated, as you're driving by. The thing I would be concerned about is the metal, right? Because I know that there's a lot of different types of metal roofs.
Yep.
And some of them have 5 colors, and one of them is green, and you have one green to work with or whatever, and they have
Right.
different textures and reflectivities, And it would be, ordinarily, because of the care that you've put in all this, I'd feel fairly confident that you guys, it was in your self-interest to find the correct material, but I think it might be a good idea. Even though this isn't by the street, it's actually beyond, it's a little past, it's not that visible from, it's part of the guest experience. You're looking at it
Right.
from the ponds and from the rooms, you know, not so much from the street. But I think it would probably be a good idea to find that and have an
Yeah.
example of it or sample.
Yeah, I'm
or
sure
something.
it's already been solved. I just don't
Yeah.
have the
Right,
answer.
okay.
Yeah, and look, I trust you too, because I mean, within the past, we've gotten to know each other over the past 2 years, and, you know, just the quality of your submission is excellent. I've been burned,
Yeah.
and it's not your fault, it's other applicants.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
understand.
just, you know, we're covering our, you know what's.
Sure.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate your patience with that. Anything else? Okay, so the other item we can consider acting on this evening, Board, is to authorize Jennifer's office to draft resolution for adoption. So either we'll take discussion or just go right to a motion.
I mean, the only thing that seems like it's still really significantly open is how to
Bond.
address the bond issue.
Yeah. I think part of the draft should cover that in the ensuing month between what we discussed with Bruce and yourself and the applicant. We'll want to make sure that that's part of the draft.
Right, so the applicant has agreed to provide Bruce with a construction schedule so that Bruce can provide recommendations to this board as to how to deal with the bond issue in our resolution. So the resolution will have one or more options for you to consider.
Or you may even just need to leave it blank, frankly. Or,
Yep.
well,
Well,
Yeah.
right.
We'll come back with recommendations.
Yeah, I think there's some wisdom behind this resolution having something codified around how bonds are managed, since it was missed last time. And the request is somewhat new around structuring the bond. So with that understanding, I'll accept a motion to authorize Jen's office to draft resolution for adoption for our review next month.
motion.
Motion by David,
Second?
second by Len.
Kevin, second by Kevin.
I'm sorry. You're over there gesticulating, I'm sorry. Did you have something?
No,
You're distracting me. Oh, you're just getting ready
just
to
wanted to
say aye.
second.
Wow, okay.
I'm so
Oh.
poised.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, I think we're all set for
All
tonight.
set?
Do you need anything else?
Nope.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. The heck was that?
It's too hot.
You're distracting me. You're like,
It's gonna be like in your peripheral vision from here on out.
It's a little warm, I think we're getting a
yeah,
little
it's hot in
nutsy.
here.
contest. Is that a mosquito in the corner or is it Len? Just signaling.
So we're going to move to item 3 on our agenda, and that's the public hearing of application for amended site plan approval to 248 Tyrone Avenue, submitted by Beacon 248 Holdings LLC. Good evening. Forgive me for 1 second.
As with the last time, I'm excused from this
yes.
item, and I think I do have to go stand outside, right?
You
Yep.
do,
Cool
yeah,
air.
yeah.
Darn it.
It'll be nice and comfortable out
Is
there.
there no air conditioning in this joint?
I don't know.
Not yet, I guess.
It's a shoulder season.
Just don't
Where's
forget
the
to do the
thermostat,
motion to open.
Bruce? I'll bring it up with Chris in the morning.
Yeah, thanks.
You gotta ask for a motion.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting myself undressed.
It's like the
So,
mosquito.
yes, our first order of business here is to open the public hearing, so I'll accept a motion to do just that.
There we go.
Motion.
Motion by David,
Second?
second by Kevin, all in favor?
Aye.
And with that, good evening.
Good evening. Kyle Ahern with Labella Associates. Also here tonight for the applicant are Barry Cohn and Jay Blumenfeld. We discussed this at the March planning board meeting. So I'll just give a very quick overview of what we discussed at the last meeting and a summary of the project for the public. The project remains identical to the approved plan from the standpoint of the uses for the site. So we have 64 apartments in buildings 200 and 300. We have 23,124 square feet of office located in building 100. We have 216 proposed parking spaces. And then, so the main impetus for the revisions were the Greenway Trail. So, and there's also some other field changes we'll discuss. But during the construction of buildings 200 and 300, which are nearing completion, just a few items became apparent of needing to be looked at again. The main one being the Greenway Trail. So the approved plan had multiple stairs that were located in order to accommodate the existing grade and also the Greenway Committee's preference for providing access down towards the creek. There was also a secondary sidewalk located on the uphill, the high side of the retaining wall, if you will. The stairs really aren't ideal for anyone. They restrict access. They're a maintenance item. They ice up during the winter. They're just, they were only proposed because, like I said, they were going with the existing grade there. So between that and the lower portion of the trail that was 4 feet below the floodplain elevation, there's been a number of storms this year where that section of trail would have been completely washed away. And we're seeing this more and more often every year. So it's no longer something we can just assume will be a one-off year with higher intensity storms. So we looked at some alternatives. We discussed them with the Greenway Committee. What we came up with was eliminating the stairs, which allows us to relocate the section of the trail that was located in this vicinity. Actually, let me go to the erosion plan. So you can kind of see this is the relocated section of trail, and then we have the slope down to where we are now stabilizing the stream bank in the vicinity of the floodplain elevation. So essentially the live stakes is where the old trail was for the lower section. So we've essentially flipped the two. So the trail now goes at the top. You no longer need stairs. However, that then eliminates that section of the lower access to the creek. So we still wanted to provide that. So we were able to two locations. We previously did have a shorter version of this northern branch that went to this approximate vicinity. We then extended it further so there's more access to the northern section of the creek, which is a pretty calm area of the creek. It's just upstream of the dam. And then go back up here. We were also, by coming further south, the existing grade there is not as steep. So we're able to add a new stub here that gets us down close to the creek. We are keeping it elevated above the floodplain because, like I said, we don't want that trail washing out every year.
Yep, we covered all of this last month.
Yep. So that's the main revisions with the Greenway. There was a couple other minor things. The refuse enclosure for 100 was moved to some in front of the pump station where we had basically some unused pavement space. So we're able to reduce some pavement there. We revised some landscaping. So there were previously some non-native plants. So we worked with the landscaping consultant, and she recommended some natives. So we replaced all the non-natives with native species. There was a question last month about this slope and how it will be stabilized. So we went back and checked it. We are speccing like an eco grass, so it is a native grass. It'll have less mowing requirements, only needs to be mowed a couple times a year. It grows a little taller, has deeper roots, so that'll stabilize. Also during construction, there's a biodegradable mat that is in place at the moment, so that will help that grass establish. And then the live stakes that we talked about last meeting.
One of the other unresolved items from last month, so talk about this, was the parking spaces adjacent to the turn-in.
Yes, so those, we still are proposing 4 spaces for the Greenway, but we eliminated those spaces altogether. We moved those 4 Greenway spaces to this bank of 4, which we had been proposing for the EV chargers. Those are now moved to this end, so we just shifted everything down essentially. So we're going back to the original parking count.
Better sight lines coming in off that turn. I
Right.
know that was a major concern
Right.
on our last review. Okay. So yeah, thanks for the summary.
Sure.
Anything else? Because yeah, we did review these in quite a bit of detail last month, so
Yep.
appreciate the summary update.
Sure.
Anything else before we go to
I mean, just on the
engineer?
lighting, there was just some poles that were in front of buildings 100 through 300, and we just replaced those with lighted bollards to decrease the glare back into the apartments. And
Okay.
I think that's all.
You're still maintaining appropriate light levels, right?
Yes, yeah. So we reran the photometrics to show all those light levels.
And you have those indicated, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's about it.
John?
So the applicant has noted that they've made application to the Department of Health.
Yes.
Anytime you make application, correspondence is to, or you're receiving from, the planning board should be receiving those along with my office.
Yes. So that will be in with the next submission. Or do you want me just to submit it now?
You can submit it now at
Okay.
this point.
We'll get it over to you.
The Greenway Trail, they have to redo the easement agreement and some of the descriptions. They are requesting that this be made part of the condition of approval. I don't see a problem with that. The easement limits that are shown on the plan, C-130.
Yeah, I think you're talking about this right here.
Yeah, along the building there, yeah, that's got to get cleaned up on the plans at this point in time. And there's some other areas I noticed some discrepancy, so you have to take a look at that. Sheet C-130, you need to show the signage for the ADA accessible stalls
Yes.
across from 200. Sheet C-140, the grading.
Yeah, that surface got left on by accident after we
Yeah, I couldn't make
updated
heads
the
or tails of
profiles.
what was going on, so
Yep.
it didn't get reviewed at this point in time.
Got extra layers turned on?
Yeah, when we updated the profiles, we turned on the surface for that, and then it got left on by accident. So
Yeah,
that's been
so-
resolved.
Doesn't show the grading properly
Yep.
at all, overlays everything. Limits of disturbance on the plans, you need to adjust that. There's areas of work going on outside the lines of what you had shown for disturbance limits. The sewer profile, sheet 161, there's an area where you only have approximately 1 foot of coverage over the sewer line.
Yes.
You're gonna need to adjust that. We need to provide additional coverage over that for protection of the line, and you may need to provide freeze protection in accordance with 10 state standards. Yes, the rest of it is just kind of cleanup.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we'll just spend some time here at the board before we go to the public, and I'll start. Were you listening when I was mentioning to the previous applicant our consternation with applications that we spend time on discussing mechanical equipment on roofs, get promises, and then turns out different?
With the screening, yes.
Did you happen to see the letter from, and I'm going to ruin this person's last name, so my apologies, Bob Kaser, public comment letter submitted?
No, I haven't seen any of the public comments.
Because if he hadn't written it, I would have. He writes, there are the approved elevations of buildings 100, 200, and 300. There are no mini-split HVAC units on the roofs, right? So right now, existing, you have condenser units all in a row up on the roof with anemic screening. There are no stainless steel chimneys rising above the roof sheds. These structures and mechanical boxes were not approved by the planning board. These are his words. The developer has deceived us. The roof elevation in reality looks nothing like the approved drawings. Quote, it is ugly. So the points he's making about those mechanical units on the roof is exactly right.
Okay.
How did they get there? Why are they there? And if they needed to be there in the first place, why didn't you tell us? Because we would have had a deeper conversation about screening. So I'll leave it at that. That's something you need to take up with Bruce. But
Understood.
my consternation, I hope, is well received. That should not have happened. Anything else? Board? Nope. We'll go to the public. Anyone here? Please. And just make sure you step to the mic. Name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Judith Tulloch, 69 Phillips Street. I just want to ask, if you're on Simmons Road and you look at the windows, are those reflective windows? Because it's very close, I'm sorry, it's a nature thing, but it's very close to an old-growth forest that's very little patch where the sewer line goes in, and it's by where if you walk the dogs from ARF, you can see the buildings, and you can see right into the windows. It's if it's the woods. Those windows reflect the woods, and you are going to have all kinds of birds crashing into your windows. So I just was wondering if is that okay to have reflective windows so close to the creek?
Again, usually we don't do questions to the planning board. This is public comment. So
I don't know.
Having asked your question, I'll leave it to the applicant
Okay.
once we're through with public comment as to whether they want to address that. So next, anyone else? Hi.
Hi, Meg Oaks, 913 Walcott. With one of my concerns too is also about nature, with the building, and I'm concerned about the water. I know when I walk along that area, there's a lot of plastic that's embedded into the soil, like right near where the Fishkill Creek is, and I feel like that will degrade and add to problems for the fish. And that's an important estuary that goes into the Hudson River. It's a big wildlife area. Like a lot of the wildlife that used to be there isn't there anymore. It's gone. It's a huge developed area now. So I'm concerned about the water, especially like the plastic netting that's dug under the dirt. Some of it's starting to degrade, and like for birds or animals that get stuck on that, but most important, like the water, it's gonna end up in the water. There's a lot of plastic right near the water. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm just curious if the applicant wants to address either of those two items.
So, Barry Cohn, in reference to the glass, I'm not sure. I don't know. It's something that...
Sorry, ma'am, we don't do back and forth here, so thank you, appreciate that.
But I can look into it and find out if that's something that the glass manufacturer addresses, but I was not familiar. I mean, I know there's rules for birds when there's a certain height of buildings. I wasn't aware that there would be something that it's a concern for this height of a window.
So, yeah, certain municipalities have requirements for, and usually it's in much more denser urban centers.
I mean, I know in New York City, I think above a certain amount of stories, they have that, so they put it into the windows. It's almost like little stickers. You don't see them.
Yeah, it's a film. It's
something like that.
Yeah, specifically designed so birds see it and they don't fly into it. So, but, and again, I'm not as deep a code expert as Bruce here or you on your application. I'm not sure it's a requirement. It may not be, and if it's not required. So, so anyway, on the netting subject.
The netting of
the plastic, the netting. Yeah.
let Kyle answer that one.
So I believe she's referring to the biodegradable erosion blanket I was talking about. So the purpose of it, and it's biodegradable, so the purpose of it is that you lay it down on the slope, you seed it, you put straw over the seed, and it stabilizes, it holds the soil in place while the grass grows through it. Then within 1 to 2 years, it will go away by itself, just based on, it's not a plastic product, so it does biodegrade.
Thank you. Yep.
Sure.
So there's no geogrid or other geo?
Not a permanent geogrid,
Okay.
no. Yep.
Great, thank you, that's helpful. Yeah, and just a note, for what it's worth, again, this particular site has been before the planning board, I can't count how many times over the last 20 years. But it used to be some degree of, I wouldn't go so far as to say brownfields, but it was a site in need of remediation.
Yeah, I think it was a brownfield.
It was brownfields. All of that has been handled, remediated to the requirements of the state. So, no further leaching. And then any of the site improvements, especially impervious surfaces, need to be designed such that they're not casting any kind of debris, oils, or anything like that into the creek. So
hey, just for our own education as a board, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says that birds can be attracted to reflections in glass that show what could appear to be elements of their natural habitat, such as plants and open sky. So we may not have any code addressing this, but it may just be something for our own interest. This is, this is, according to Fish and Wildlife Service, something that should be considered if you're going to have large areas of glass that are reflecting habitat.
yeah, and in this case, that would be elective. So with no other comments from the public, we'll discuss a motion to close the public hearing, or otherwise accept a motion.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Motion by Len.
Second?
Second by, who was that? Kevin? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then we have a draft to review for which has not lived for its requisite 30 days.
Right, so at the last meeting, you did direct preparation of secret documents and a resolution. However, 30 days has not passed since your last meeting for this, to allow for circulation of notice of intent for your,
How many has, not 29?
less than 30.
Wow.
So
Short month.
we can't move forward. We do have draft documents, but we can't move forward with adopting those documents until your next meeting.
Next month, yep.
So I did circulate those to the board in advance of this meeting. If you have any comments before the May meeting, let me know.
Yep.
I can make those revisions, but otherwise, we're ahead of the game for next month.
Good stuff. Okay. That's about all the business we can address
Okay,
for you
yes.
this evening. Anything else?
That's all for us.
Awesome.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good evening. So, next item on the agenda is the continued review of applications for site plan approval, subdivision approval, and special use permit, place of worship, 409 Fishkill Avenue. What are you doing here?
I believe you volunteered me, Mr. Chairman.
Is this the wrong application? Or? Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. For the record, Taylor Palmer with the law firm of Cuddy & Fader on behalf of the applicant. Tonight I am joined by Mike Bodendorf of Hudson Land Design. As the chairman stated, we were the applicant was last before you in March when the board closed the public hearing. We are before you tonight for the continued site plan special permit and lot merger application for SGI. We did include a supplemental submission to your board responding to comments that was dated March 26th, and we updated the site plan to reflect, for example, the stockade fence, which was increased from 5 feet to 6 feet, and we incorporated the lighting into our modeling for that. We adjusted some light poles that are closest to the rear the residential lots, so those have been reduced from height 20 to 15 feet, so we brought those closer to the ground. A lot of it was lighting and screening that was involved, all comments from the public and those that have been addressed. So the rear security lighting have also been lowered in intensities for those hotspots. So again, a lot of really an exercise for lighting and screening. So we did have a chance to review a copy of the draft resolution, and there are really just typographical notes that we mentioned to the city attorney, but we have been brought in specifically to draft the reciprocal easement and access agreement over the lots. So we have a draft of that, which we'll provide to the city attorney and engineer, as well as the offer of dedication for the triangle over on Conklin.
I gotcha. Okay. And you're throwing in an extra visit to the planning board.
I tend to be here pretty often. You
Okay.
can always tell it's peaking in April when the air conditioning hasn't been turned over yet. So
I love the fact that even during the pandemic, you'd show up on screen with a suit on. Any thoughts from your review you want to share with us?
Mine was really a closeout letter, kind of
Yep.
noting what Taylor just went through in terms of, I think the biggest thing we were focusing on at the last meeting was spillover onto the residential properties, and through modifications to light pole height and fencing, that has been eliminated, and so that
Good.
resolved my remaining comment.
Excellent, thanks. Mr. Russo?
I reviewed the subdivision or the consolidation dedication plat that was found to be acceptable. The description for that dedication was found to be acceptable. They do need to post some bonding, and I'm sure that's in the resolution. That's all I have.
Jennifer shaking her head. Yes. Great, thanks. We do have a draft that we can review and consider acting on this evening. In advance of that, any other questions of the applicant or our consultants board? Great, so then we can go to our draft. Talk about a potential adoption. Any discussion around the matter? Anything you want to point out to us?
No, I mean, it's the resolution accomplishes the lot merger of those
Yep.
two lots where the building is straddling, the two special permits, and also the site plan approval for the project.
There was a conveyance here too, wasn't there?
There's the offer of dedication. Yeah, so that's covered
That's
in here
covered.
as a condition that the applicant will provide to the city a written offer of dedication to accompany the plat.
All right, great. So with that, unless there's any other questions or comments, I'll accept a motion to adopt.
Motion.
Motion by David,
Seconded by Len.
second by Len. All in favor? Aye. Again, you were taking your chance with just a quorum here, so. Oof. With that, anything else for this particular application? I think you're up on the next one too, huh?
indeed,
So,
you're sensing a theme.
with that, yeah, hopefully we move through the next one as quickly.
Absolutely.
We'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is the continued review of application for site plan approval and special use permit car dealership, 410 Fishkill Avenue, submitted by Carvana LLC. Good evening again.
Good evening. For the record, I have no idea who that last presenter was, but for the record, I am Taylor Palmer with the law firm of Cuddy and Fader on behalf of the applicant, DKH Realty and Carvana. I am again joined by Mike Bodendorf of Hudson Land Design and Jennifer Roldan, who's the senior project manager for Carvana. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we were last, again, the applicant was last before you in March for a preliminary presentation regarding Carvana's proposal to reoccupy or tenant the former Healy Hyundai location at 410 Fishkill Avenue, across the street from that last application. Again, don't know who the presenter was. As we more fully detailed in our comments to the board dated March 26th, the updates to the site plan reflect the board's comments about the existing conditions from the prior site plan for what was approved for Healy Hyundai, and of course the goal here, as we can show in just a minute, as to improve many of these existing conditions, right? So a lot of the comments related to existing operations, existing conditions, and we're working in the site plan. I know Carvana is working diligently to do that too, to improve a lot of those. So for example, we did include changes to the striping plan. We included some landscape planters, again, comments that were incorporated in both the city planner and city engineers comment, and of course brought up by the board at the last meeting. Overall, of course, as we mentioned in the last presentation, this is an overall reduction really in the operations that are going to be happening on the site, and really occurred for the last few decades. So Carvana will be leasing the whole building on site, and really will only be doing inspections for New York State inspections, and will not be limited, and that won't be open to the public per se. It won't be call up and say, hey, I need to do some work on my car. Since we did last appear before you during the quake of 25, we did appear at the site with MTA Metro North. So we did meet with them. There was a comment regarding existing encroachments. So we did have an opportunity there. Just for the record, we didn't feel it. But I guess that's what happens when you're on the ground and traffic going by. So those representatives, Metro North, did put us in touch with the real estate folks there, and they will be working with us to whether they're going to call it a license agreement or easement agreement to effectively memorialize those improvements. To say they may not convey them, that's, you know, maybe a separate discussion, but ultimately we'll have something embodying those encroachments. It's a very long process with MTA Metro North for any of that. Of course, this is a rail line that the planner pointed out is going to be abandoned, and of course, aspirationally is some new, you know, future rail trail. So we're cognizant of that as we go through this.
I'm eager to see the resolution of an encroachment onto MTA property.
Oh yeah, we've
Should be
done it.
interesting.
Yeah, we've done it before. We did it actually for the DBW project. Historically, those were old rail. Well, excuse me, they were carriage roads. I think Mr. Russo probably remembers that well. So you know that was back in the TEC land surveying days. He's left us, of course, for the big leagues.
Yep.
Maybe he'll come back someday when he's done with his drones. But we have had that experience before, and MTA is good with this. As far as the site visit, they said, let's just get this memorialized. And I think their concern's more about liability, I think, and I'm speaking for it, than they are the realities. Because when you're on the site, and I encourage you all to see it, it really is in the topography, it's a very steep drop. I mean, it goes right off in that location. It also provides firematic access for that aspirational trail at someday, which we'll also get to sort of in the discussion, should the board have questions on that side of it. So one other thing I did just want to note out that it's not included in the submission, but we will get you pictures. I have them on my phone from our general contractor at the site, but the applicant did clean up the blown debris. That was a question that had come up, I think, from the Conservation Advisory Commission, and to the extent we have cleaned that up. We'll have before and after pictures, which we'll submit, and it's more of like a public hearing deliverable, but we do have cleanup that was done behind the site, and we've got the proof in the pudding there. Lastly, we are still in talks with Central Hudson. It's their lights that there are mentions of existing bright lights on the site. Their poles are on the site providing those bright lights.
Whose poles?
Central Hudson.
That's their light?
Their lights. The poles the telephone poles that are on the site.
Say that again.
There's some poles at the back of the property that have bright lights. Those are Central Hudson's poles.
Is it their light?
Yes.
Oh.
But we're working with that. We're hoping to find, ways to.
Because one of the observations was that on the site there is an extremely high level of lighting. So I wasn't aware that the source of that was not necessarily.
Yeah, Carvana has proposed a new lighting plan that's going to be addressing this, consistent with the city's lighting requirements. So that's just something that where we control it, we're proposing it, but we're working with Central Hudson to try and get rid of existing conditions that otherwise aren't necessary and otherwise cause impacts. We did look at the nearest residential designations, about 190 feet directly west, and then 500 feet if you're to the east. But we have a lighting plan that has been revised to reflect the new or current beacon code requirements.
Might be helpful if it could be noted which poles are Central Hudson, understanding that you might not be able to change those, but I don't think that that's distinguished necessarily.
But you did mention you're entering into conversations with them as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And based on comments that were received from the plurality, I guess, of comments from the different boards.
So you got the MTA and Central Hudson to contend with. Who knew things could be so
Not a trail yet, so not the Greenway Trail Committee.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. Anything else?
Just procedurally, it is a type 2 action under seeker, so from a standpoint of procedure, there is no notifying lead agencies. I did have a chance to speak with Ms. Gray before the meeting. While we're, I think, collectively of the opinion that this section of 52 is controlled by the City of Beacon and there would be no other triggering requirements, I think maybe a precautionary if the board is, once we've discussed, if they're comfortable setting a public hearing or moving the next step, a county referral for general municipal law might be appropriate. Again, even though we're on a state road, but it's one of those areas where the city controls the state highway. Yeah, that was a lot of words, but it's just.
And you talk too fast sometimes, although I did catch firematic, and that's not a word. So what was your point?
You get the check for today. My associate keeps track of the one word I make up each meeting.
He was basically just saying that even though a general municipal law referral to the county is not per se required, he thinks it might be prudent to do it in this instance.
What say
He has no
you?
objection to the planning board referring it to the county. I mean, it's always better to have more input than less. I wouldn't object if the board wants to refer it to the county. The worst the county can do is send it back and say, this doesn't trigger our jurisdiction, it's a matter of local concern.
Fine with me. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the more input, the better.
Yeah, typically this is a step that's just done administratively without you needing to authorize it, or we just take care of it administratively when
That's
it's
fine.
required.
Yeah, I think, and I don't think the applicant would have mentioned it if he thought it was going to open a can of worms. So,
Why risk a delay?
yeah,
Okay.
let's do it. So with that, we'll turn to our consultants and we'll go in reverse order, Mr. Russo, because you have more.
I have more.
No.
No, he has more.
Natalie,
He
he have more?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go.
A lot of them we have are
Oh, you do have more?
shared.
Yeah.
Want me to go? All right.
Yeah.
So one thing we're asking of the applicant is to perform an inflow and infiltration or I&I study of the site. We want to know if there's any cross connections, in which there's any
Yep,
stormwater getting into our sanitary system.
standard stuff. No objections?
Want some more information with regards to utilities that are servicing the site. We have questions with regards to the layout of the parking on the site. It's getting kind of confusing on sheet 3 of 3. A lot of the lines are overlapping. You're calling for access in certain areas, but I don't see how you're even achieving access with the proposed parking that you've got in that area of access. So that needs to be detailed out further and looked at. Specifically on the right side, well, if you're facing the building, looking at the left side, you've got 14 spaces, more or less a double stacking in that area, but yet you're calling for an access aisle through there. It's just not possible to get through that area. The parking stall striping on the left front side of the building should not be shown extending beyond the property line. Right now we have striping that extends out into the right-of-way. There shouldn't be vehicles parking out in the right-of-way. With regards to the signage, the applicant notes that he's going to defer that until such time as getting a permit from the building department.
But it'll be relatively in line with that rendering you showed us, right?
The encroachments, Mr. Palmer talked about, and then the other thing was...
It's better than the Larry Paggi plan. I love you, Larry, but we're getting better.
The other thing was the lighting plan. Mike, with regards to this lighting plan that was submitted, is this showing the existing conditions of the site, or is this also proposed?
We'll circle back with any clarification.
Yeah, because concerns with that, you also have some high intensity along the front of that building. You know, you're upwards of 8.6 on the ground. You've got some significant lighting and hot spots.
Okay.
That's all I have for the moment.
Great. Natalie?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that we talked about at the last meeting was getting more details so that we could look at things like circulation on site and lighting, which was provided in this last plan. So I had 2 points under parking layout and circulation. John just covered one of them, that on the northern portion of the site, it gets a little confusing with the stacked parking, how that's going to work there. So might be something we want to have the applicant talk through a little bit more. The other piece was with the no parking loading zone that is on the southern portion of the site, that is kind of in the front of the site. Yeah, it's being highlighted on the plans there. So it is, you know, in between the roadway and the site. We talked about this pullout being necessary, this kind of loading zone being necessary because these larger vehicles not being able to get on the site and kind of turn around on the site and maneuver. So that does make sense. I just had some questions based on the landscaping that was placed around this. I just wasn't quite sure how vehicles were going to be loaded off of this and onto the site, and whether they were going to have to go across Fishkill Avenue, causing potential traffic issues there, or if there was some other way that the applicant was thinking that this loading would happen that wouldn't impact the flows. Because I think that's the whole point of having this loading zone, is so that these vehicles
Doesn't impede flow.
doesn't impede flow.
Yep.
So just that was one point of wanting to talk through that a little bit further. There is the issue of parking requirements. So apropos to our conversation at the beginning of the meeting in the training session, under the existing code, based on the parking requirement for use like this, motor vehicle sales and service, is based on square footage and employees. So based on the numbers we've been given of 12 to 15 employees, and the amount of space in the building, and all of that will be used, the parking requirement for a use like this is 125 to 128 spaces, which I believe there are 70 provided on site. It's a caveat, under the new code, it's 51 to 84 as the min to max. But so, you know, I think
Not the law yet, though.
well, it's not a lot, but I'm just saying, I think the argument is being made
if I
that
had
not
said
all
that-
that parking
You have
is,
some choices.
that not all that parking is
Yep.
needed. But I think in going through the code, there's not an ability for
Right.
the planning board right now to waive those spaces or to give a different requirement. So I think based now on the code, that would require a variance from the ZBA.
Or you just wait for the new law.
Yeah, unless there's an
I'm ready to
opportunity
answer,
to
yeah,
land
I'm
bank.
gonna have Jennifer answer the first two, but then I'll touch that one on.
Okay,
Yeah, actually, Jennifer made a good point. There's also the land bank option.
Yep.
or land bank option, okay.
Yeah, just in GB, whereas CMS and others have a whole host of other parking analyses that we can entertain, as was conveniently discussed earlier
Yep.
this evening.
So one of my other comments continues, it's comment number 3, the frontage and landscaping.
Yeah.
This continues from the last meeting that we just didn't get a chance to really dig into it. So the front property line of this parcel is essentially 500 feet in length, and there is no curbing, there is no landscaping. The only thing that kind of dictates where cars should be coming in and out of this space is painted lines.
Yep.
Which can lead to
Confusion.
unpredictable turning of vehicles onto the site, off of the site. There's not a crosswalk here, so, or a sidewalk on this side of the street, but people still do ride their bikes, or even I've seen people walk on this side of the street, so that still happens. So, you know, my question was what can be done, and I think this was done a little bit with the loading zone at the one side to varying degrees of success, but what can be done on the northern portions of the lot to ensure, maybe it's just curb stops, maybe it's landscaping, to just ensure that this whole frontage is not treated as a driveway. There was a number of comments on the lighting plan, which really it was kind of just specifications that need to be added,
Yep.
kind of showing that the proposed lighting fixtures meet the code. I did note the hot spots that John picked up and kind of questioned whether that lighting could be reduced. And then the last 2 comments I think are just for consideration, having to do with the rear yard and those encroachments that were already addressed, and then just continue to recognize what was already addressed, that this is the proposed location of a rail trail behind that. So I think just keeping that in mind with where the refuse enclosures are, how are we ensuring refuse stays within those and doesn't kind of travel down into this space that is the creek, the greenway, and, you know, may one day be rail trail.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo your observations on the striping as far as the north part of the lot especially. It's just a bunch of lines. So I'm certain you're going to update that and clarify for next review. Same with, and I see this wasn't in our package.
Correct. Yeah, this was not included in the submission. This we just have because we were trying to get materials to be responsive to the comments.
Yeah,
Just have a
so
visual.
primary is, to at least to my thinking, is exactly what Natalie pointed out. This used to be one of my common running, part of my long run, and I would run on that side mainly because it offered that amount of relief from the traffic.
Mm-hmm.
But it is actually more sort of a crapshoot because of what's going on in the parking lot, and you don't necessarily know, to your point, where somebody might come out of that lot onto 52, because it's so random. There is the demarcations, so
Yeah, wayfinding I think is going to be appropriate. I think
to that point,
trying
I think,
to sort of
yeah,
articulate that now with this
there has
design.
been some indication of directional arrows, signage, planters. They're a little anemic. that's just my observation, but I think we need some real distinction and real clarity on just that, especially at the north end, because I can't figure out what's going on in the site plan.
Okay.
Any thoughts, board?
I had a question sort of for the city planner. I know that there's a committee. There's a committee that's currently contemplating some of the changes that might occur that we might want to have happen on this area, the Fishkill Avenue corridor. And I was wondering if there was discussion of the sort of street section improvements, the ways that sidewalks are generally in common going to be arranged, the way planning is going to be generally arranged as on that area, in that region of the city, to make an improvement, right? And whether or not there were things that we might request, right, of this application that would contribute towards the sort of thing that they're looking at, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, there are huge problems. I thought that one of the opportunities of re-examining that area was not having it be like every other strip mall, right? And either in appearance or in the way that it works or the way it is economically. I don't want to go on and on because there's other people doing that work. But my question was, are there ideas that we can start putting into place in the interim? And requesting.
Yeah, so I think to that point, I think that's where this requirement, I think two of the things, that committee is in the very early stages, but I think two things that are already kind of forming as topic areas are complete streets improvements, right? Looking at sidewalks and other amenities in this space. And then the other one is zoning. I think you're limited in zoning in terms of there's no proposed changes to the building. So it's not like we could tell them to kind of get rid of the strip mall and aspect and put that closer. But I think the aspect about thinking about predictability of vehicle movements and pedestrian and cyclist like safety improvements, that is what this committee is looking at. And I think this board has the opportunity to look at that on a private parcel level, whereas the committee can make recommendations more in the public realm in terms of potential sidewalk and right-of-way improvements. But I think this aspect that we're talking about right now in terms of like how do we just make this site a little bit more predictable for traffic, pedestrian, and other modes of transit is directly in line with what that committee is trying to think. There's a very auto-oriented aspect of this, understanding this is still auto-oriented use and it is a permitted use. I think what you can do in this site to alleviate some of the existing conditions issues of vehicles being unpredictable
well, there's the public safety. The other aspect was just the visual noise that high-speed arteries have signage sizes and signage materials and other things that we aren't typical of the rest of the city, let's say. So there's two ways to look at it. One of them is, well, this is going to be our little ugly area that we have in Beacon that makes money with cars or whatever is a large open area.
Yeah.
Or we can maybe start thinking about the way that presents differently as an entrance to the city.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we'll have to use the tools that are provided to us by the code as it currently exists. And I think there is conversation about circulation and landscaping that we can bring into this site. But I get the point about signage sizing and things like that, and I think there is, I don't think there's a sign permit currently before the board to necessarily consider and make suggestions on, but again, I think the conversation being had is directly in line with recommendations that are going to be coming out of that committee. The recommendations are not out. I won't speak for a committee that's, that's still working.
Yeah, and this is an existing site plan that we're working to amend too, right? So it's not like a typical application that you'll see a lot of the applicant staff with, which is a new project, new proposal, multi-story, mixed. This is a change of tenant.
It's what we call a patch and match in the business.
Right, but you are spending money.
Oh, there's no question,
and
they're
spending money in several different.
They're
ways.
improving the site over the existing conditions. That's the goal. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight, we didn't bring it up in the presentation, but we have discussed based on the comments from the city planner, is some type of, if the board saw fit, some sort of future, the same way we did for Edgewater, and I'm going to use that nomenclature again, so forgive me. at the Edgewater project, there wasn't yet a trail, a greenway trail in that area of the city, right? But there was always the thought that someday, aspirationally, there will be the greenway trail that could connect to the connection trail that's on the Edgewater property. So to the extent this may provide, and we've tracked and followed all of the committee's comments. Actually, the owner of the property is on that committee. So we've been monitoring all of their comments, their maps, the markups, the plans, the bike lanes, things to that extent. So this area where Conklin is could be an opportunity in the future where there may be a crosswalk, you know, from this site through to the Greenway Trail. So we may be, you know, if the board saw fit, able to offer something like, in the future, should this trail come to be, and this is an appropriate location to create a linkage, then at such time, you know, and so forth. So we're amenable to something to that effect because while a trail doesn't exist, the railway hasn't been abandoned, and it's good planning principles to be there, but I think in this instance, knowing and monitoring and having a property owner who is a part of this committee trying to be aware of these things and put these into place. So that might be something too, the existing regulations that we could incorporate into this approval.
I think it would be an opportunity to put those things in place, any aspiration ideals at this early stage.
Indeed.
That would be my recommendation rather than it being very much like other developments like this.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin. Anything else? Got some good feedback?
Indeed.
Okay. Anything else, board? Yep.
Just one question. Do we have enough of an understanding of the parking factors to help us consider whether we could take one of the avenues within our purview, like land banking?
The only avenue within your purview is land banking.
Yeah, so
the applicant would have to demonstrate that they can show
Exactly.
125 to 128 parking spaces on the site in a way that's laid out in accordance with the code that can be activated in the future.
But they also have a choice, whether they want to approach a land banking solution, or whether they want to approach a variance solution, or whether they want to wait for the new law to come
Thank you,
into
Mr. Chairman. I
place.
think that's a perfect segue. And here, there wouldn't, while we're looking at it, we don't expect there to be an opportunity for land banking, that level of parking. It also is completely, that number of parking spaces is completely out of touch with the realities of A, the site operations, B, this type of use in 2024. So likelihood here is we'd ask that the board, we'll have to speak to Bruce about that, the determination, right? The current code says X, we need Y to have the opportunity to potentially apply to the zoning board to seek that relief. We'll happily withdraw that request if the zoning change takes place, but we don't want to necessarily sit in a lie and wait position because we want to actively get this thing moving there.
I'll mention too, it could be a combination, right? That there might be a couple more
Sure,
spaces
you're right,
that you could
you're
eke
right.
out on the plan
You're right.
that can be land banked, thereby reducing the variance request.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So I think procedurally, what might make sense is for this board to provide sort of a preemptive referral to the zoning board if it's determined that a variance is required, so that they have their green light to apply to the zoning board if that's the route that's going to be taken.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that's one of the parallel approaches you're taking. So with that, I'll accept the motion to extend our referral to the zoning board for this application.
Okay, motion to refer to zoning board.
Motion by Len.
Second.
Second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anything else we can do for you?
Excuse me. The only other request then, Mr. Chairman, would be if the board would consider setting public hearing for the May meeting agenda. We, ultimately, if we do appear before the zoning board, we may ask to adjourn, but I think there are still items that we might want to discuss with the board in sort of call it parallel. So we just ask that the board consider setting public hearing for
May?
For May.
Can we really do that if that
I don't
parking issue
think
is
we
outstanding
can.
like that?
No.
That's a pretty big piece of this.
Like when are you planning to go to the zoning board?
In May. So it would be a week after you, but we'd want to, there's, for example, there's a recommendation that's involved typically from your board to the zoning board.
But presumably, based on what the zoning board does, you're going to be putting on updated site plans.
Well, we're gonna update the site plan, I think, reflective of the conditions that are, what the calculation is today. What we submit to the zoning board would be justifications of why we should be, why the city's in the process of changing the zoning, the uses are these, making those justifications, because that's a variance that we need. For your board, the site plan will just be updated to reflect those numbers.
So there's nothing in the code or by law generally that would preclude a simultaneous track. I think the question is just, are they going to be ready? Are you going to be ready to close the public hearing if it's opened in May? It may just need to be,
We can just carry it over.
continued
I mean, look, I don't
the
see any
next
harm in it
month.
as long as the applicant knows they need to have their ducks in a row. Otherwise, you're
100%.
sort of putting the
Well,
cart
yeah.
before the horse.
If the zoning board signs off on the requested variance
Yes,
in accordance with the plans that are in front of us, then,
then it's fine.
yeah, it's
Exactly.
not an issue. The risk is if it doesn't go according to plan like that.
Yeah, we'd have
probably
to submit
renotice
within
the
1
meeting.
week of that meeting to be updated for your June agenda. The idea being that if we could have some of these other discussions like we did today about the striping and things that are not zoning related, that address the concerns of site plan, special permit, et cetera, then by June, hopefully, we'd be in a potential position to.
We could certainly talk about setting the public hearing. The only risk is if we have to hold it over.
Exactly.
We've done a whole process of noticing that kind of confuses people. But
And they're also going to get a public hearing at zoning board, so there's multiple hearings that will
Right.
take place.
that could also confuse people.
I think as long as the applicant understands what the risk is, we should.
Yeah, you have the benefit of the
Do it.
former chair of the zoning board offering.
Never met him,
his
just like the guy that
clear
presented the last
advice.
application.
Got some heavy hitters here tonight. I'm fine with it. It's, again, you've got a couple of needles to thread.
Understand.
so-
Well,
The one request I'd make is if the result of that zoning board hearing is that it appears you're likely going to have to renotice this, please tell us the day after the zoning board meeting.
100%.
Because some of
Yeah.
us are like spending some significant time reviewing this stuff in advance of the meeting. So
Oh,
if
yeah,
that's
I mean,
where
it's not going to be
we'll skip it.
yeah, respectfully, I don't believe it's going to be a material change. We're identifying the number we have. The code doesn't exist yet that would exempt us, effectively absolve us of those requirements, but because we're trying to make sure that Carvana can get in the space and tenant, and of course, we will hopefully speak to Bruce on that, separately, but we're just trying to make sure, and procedurally, we understand that if the action is not taken by the zoning board, clearly, we're still in process. And unfortunately, the boards meet in the reverse order for an applicant that would want to hopefully get tonight be zoning board and next week be planning. But we hear you and we understand that procedurally, and we've explained that to the applicant.
Okay, so I'll accept a motion to set public hearing for the month of May.
Motion.
Motion by David,
Seconded by Len.
second by Lynn. You stole my line. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Trying to streamline.
Thank you.
Do we
Thank you,
want
guys.
Do we want to send a message to the zoning board of any sort along with this, or just let them figure it out on their own?
That's right, we don't have the
The zoning
opportunity
board
to.
meeting is after your next meeting, right?
Right, we won't be there
It
next
is,
week.
You're right.
Yeah, so at your May 14th meeting, you'll have an
Right.
opportunity to send any comments
Right.
to the zoning board.
Although that'll be public hearing. But
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah, typically, once the agenda is posted for the zoning board meeting,
Yep.
then provide any comments.
We just won't necessarily want to close until we have public hearing.
Right.
Yep.
Well, I don't.
Or until we have zoning
answer
board.
from the zoning board.
An answer
I
from
don't
the
see how
zoning
we
board.
can.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry, I meant to say, we don't necessarily want to close until we have an answer from the zoning board, which would most likely carry over to the month,
Yeah. which is fine.
the month after, so. Okay.
And hopefully by then, the city council will have adopted
Pass a
those
new
regs.
law.
Good luck.
We'll be on. Yeah, I got a lot of laughs there.
There are
That was
public-
my-
there are
that was my
public-
joke tonight.
There are public hearings coming
I
up,
would
is
have called
what
that
I'm
a
saying.
guffaw.
And I wouldn't rush it for a particular applicant. I think
No.
that wouldn't be wise.
I don't expect they will, right? Thank you.
Okay, are you with us, are you going to pull an R.A. Siegel and stick with us for the next one?
I don't even have any extensions that I could ask to jump ahead.
Oh. Taking all the fun out of it. Okay.
Mike says I can do it, but I'd have to look at the plans first.
Thank you.
Stay
I'm
cool.
going to request a quick break. We'll be back here in exactly a minute and a half.
Let's talk about our flag lot.
Yeah, let's go to the next agenda item. Thanks for that quick reprieve. So the next item on the agenda is first before us, review of application for subdivision approval, residential 39 Howland Avenue, submitted by John Vergara. Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, Mike Bodendorf, engineer for the applicant, Hudson Land Design Engineers. So this is a subdivision of an existing lot with an existing house on it, and we're creating one additional building lot. The parcel lies within the R17.5 zoning district, consists of 0.68 acres, and we're going to subdivide the lot into a 10,000 square foot lot in the front and an 18,000 square foot lot in the rear. Procedurally, we believe that this project falls under an unlisted action under seeker. So we'll be asking the board to declare their intent in terms of lead agency and possibly determine whether a coordinated review is required. And then lastly, we'll ask if the board is comfortable, if they feel comfortable to set a public hearing for the next meeting.
What's your name? Taylor Palmer?
I know him.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
But we can first talk about our desire to notice our intent to act as lead agency.
Sure.
Any comments or discussion? Otherwise, I'll accept a motion to do that.
I don't know who else is going to do it. Motion to act as lead agency?
Express our intent to act as lead agency.
There you go.
So motion by Kevin,
Seconded.
second by Len. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And with that, speaking of a lot of comments, Mr. Russo, we'll start with you. This is a long one.
Right off the bat, we're asking for an INI study of the existing parcel and dwelling there. With regards to the subdivision plat, we're asking for an updated survey. It's been 27 years since the survey's been done. Noticing things on the survey that do not exist in the field anymore. And
Field work was done yesterday, by the way.
Same
Too late.
thing with regards to topography. You know, I know
Yep.
you referenced New York State GIS. Somehow we should confirm topography that's actually out there.
Absolutely.
Also, under the bulk table that was on the subdivision plat, you had notes A, D, and E. I think they should be removed. They all apply to multifamily and townhouse developments. This is not, so I don't want to confuse anybody having that on there. There are also encroachments onto the property itself with the neighbor's driveway and along with, I believe, might be some fencing on the southeast side.
Right.
So I think that's going to be one of those things we're going to want to provide notes on the plans, Jennifer, as to.
Yeah, but the board is not, in the event the board approves this plan, the board is in no way approving the encroachments to remain. That's a matter between the
Yeah, that has
private
to be
property
resolved.
owners, yeah.
Yep.
But that, yeah, but,
Mike?
forget it.
So I believe it was a subdivision you did on Roundabout Avenue.
Yeah.
Notes were prepared. Jennifer had prepared
Yeah.
notes at that time that you included on that subdivision plat. So you may want to take a look back at that one. Sheet number 2, look at the comments 4 and 5 with regards to the survey and topography, you'd update that. Sheet 3, same with regards to the notes under the bulk table. Location of the water and sewer services for Lot 1 should be provided on plan. Want to make sure there's no conflicts, and we'd like to know where those utilities are coming from. As far as the utilities in the road, want to know the size and material of the utilities. I did provide you or send you some additional mapping with regards to utilities that are out there. Actually, there's a 6-inch water line on your side of the road. On the other side is a 12-inch transmission line that you would be able to tap. There's also storm drainage present on Howland Avenue. That should be present on the plan. Have a concern with how you're going to achieve SOAR from the proposed dwelling on Lot 2 because you are significantly lower than the road. You're 8 to 9 feet below the elevation of the road. The SOAR is probably only 5 to 6 feet in that area. So I don't know if you're going to pump, what you're going to do.
Yeah, once we get that new survey, we'll be able to determine all those elevations, and if we need a pump, we'll provide that information on the plans.
Any porches, walks, or stairs for the access for the proposed dwelling on Lot 2 should be shown on the plan. Is the house on Lot 2 a slab on grade, or if there's a basement, that should be noted along with the elevation of the basement. I'm not sure if there's a garage, if that's a side entry garage or not. If we could just call that out and give an elevation for the garage floor. With regards to the grading should be done in such a way that water drains away from the foundation all the way around the building. That's right from the residential state code. You have to drop at least 6 inches within the first 10 feet. We would recommend providing screening between lots 1 and 2. You've got the front of the house looking into the back of the existing house. We'd also look at additional screening being provided around the perimeter of the property itself to the other neighbors, unless there's fencing there, solid fencing or anything else. The other thing would be the grading of the driveway should be done so as not to direct water towards the neighboring property, direct it back towards yourself. And then just some other cleanup comments.
That's it? That's all you got?
Well, yeah, at this point.
Okay. I just have a quick question. Does this subdivision create 2 conforming lots?
For most yes,
In this
for all,
district?
yeah, for
Yeah.
all the lot and bulk regulations, it does.
Gotcha. Thank you. And any other observations? You have 2 notes you wanted to at least highlight for the applicant. I'm
Yeah.
curious about this frontage
Yeah, I
question.
think the first piece was, it kind of gets to, John, you just implied that the building is facing the back of the front lot, which it wasn't clear to me based on the plan, just because we didn't have floor plans exactly which, so
Right.
there is a regulation in the code that says any new one-family dwellings shall face the front lot line. So I just wasn't quite sure which way this was facing, and if it is facing the back of the back of that house on the front lot, then I would agree with John about some kind of landscaping or fencing being proposed there. So I just wasn't clear on that, so I think clarity on which direction, and then that falls to the building inspector, that the front dwelling shall be the front of the dwelling, he gets to determine which way that's facing. And then I think this gets back to the survey aspect. It looked from kind of aerial maps that there are existing parking spaces on the front lot. It just wasn't shown on the survey or the plan, so
Yeah.
I couldn't calculate whether this was meeting the parking requirements or not, whether there was space for that.
For the remaining, the existing.
For the existing,
Yeah.
and I assume there's,
Yeah.
I think the spaces could be delineated, 2 spaces are required, so I think to John's question, is there a garage there? It looks like there's a driveway coming up, so I'm assuming there's a garage, so that clarity, each dwelling requires 2 parking spaces under the
Yeah, there's no
current code.
garage, but there is another curb cut and gravel parking to the south of that house.
Mhm.
So what you're saying,
Yeah.
what you're saying is please indicate that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
we'll clear all that up.
And then just as far as the frontage,
Yeah.
that's odd, right? That long face
Yeah.
east would be the front of the house. It's facing the back of the existing house. I would consider the proximity of where the house is sitting relative to, again, I don't know what the distance is. It looks like it's maybe 20 feet between the rear lot line, which could be a fence, and what would then be the front of this new house.
Mhm.
It's weird sighting, that's all. And I have a sense that David has some other observations he wants to make.
No, I have the same observation. It's weird citing it. I handled a piece of litigation in the city that concerned a flag-shaped lot in Manhattan, and by the time I got it, it was other issues, but it had originally been, they'd appealed the grant of a variance and litigated it all through Board of Standards and Appeals, and all of this stuff came out on planning considerations surrounding flag lots, and the essential takeaway was flag lots are generally disfavored. I know I went by this location, and the end result of this proposed subdivision is not really going to line up with the neighborhood too well. One thing I also noted is we've got a lot of lots in this neighborhood that are pre-existing nonconformities, 50-foot lot widths, et cetera. Under the zoning code 22312 subpart J, when this board is hearing applications to subdivide, one option we have is to modify lot and yard requirements in order to get a result that lines up with stated criteria in that subpart, preserving character, et cetera. My number one question, if you put a 10-foot side yard on the house that's currently there and draw the property line right there, and the only thing you're trying to comply with is the side yard, rear yard, and front yard requirements, how close can you get structure 2 to the street?
I'm not sure if I'm following you.
So can you have
if-
two
if-
buildings facing the street rather than having one hidden behind, right?
Yeah, put it a different way. What if there was no 75-foot minimum lot requirement and you were trying to subdivide here? What would that look like? Because I think that result might be a lot more fitting with the neighborhood.
If there wasn't a 75-foot width requirement?
Right. So right now,
Well,
you've
have
got
your-
114 feet or so of lot, and you're cutting 25 feet off, so you've got 90 feet left. Presumably, the reason you're only cutting 25 is because no matter what, you couldn't get two conforming lots. And I don't think it would be possible I don't think it would be possible to squeeze a house
You have the
into that
existing,
space,
you
but
have the
I'm wondering
existing
if
structure to contend with.
Right, but I'm wondering what would happen if that 75-foot minimum width didn't apply, so that you could basically change where that second house is located so that it is closer to the street.
Actually, you make a really good point.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That would be a lot more consistent with the neighborhood, and we've got
Yeah.
full authority under the zoning code to just
Well, I'm
say
just-
we approve it like this.
So that's a good point. I'm just now registering the relationship of the existing house to its northern lot line. My original sense in going by there, and I'm also familiar with this just historically, is that there's a driveway to the south.
Yep.
And there's the house, and then there's a driveway just to the north of the house. I thought that
Right.
at the north end of the side of the driveway, that was the lot line, but it looks like you actually have much more property between
is.
the house and the northern lot line. So to
Yeah.
your point, how would, exactly, just looking at that, yeah.
If we took that schedule of dimensional regulations
Yep.
and took a red pen and put an X through one or two of them, could we get a result that would be a lot better for the neighborhood? That's the question.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, when I looked at this, I actually did a feasibility study on this a couple years ago, and I don't think there's enough width to get the other lot in there up
Yeah.
front to get 75 on both.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
But to, I guess, better the flagpole portion of the rear lot.
So you don't have a 125-foot long driveway in a neighborhood where everyone else is pretty much up on the street.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, always the concern with something like this, and there's no doubt that the relationship of the existing house to the street is historic, and
Right.
the size of the lot is unique, meaning all of these houses from that property up to the cross street, they have enormous backyards. And they're backyards, right? That's how they sort of act and feel and look at the moment, right? I think the planning approach needs to be, and along the lines of what David is saying, how do we avoid this looking like a house just plonked in somebody's backyard? Right? How do we make this feel a little bit more conforming to the context?
Yeah, relaxing the yard and the width requirements, especially in this neighborhood, would
Yeah.
look a lot more conforming than,
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
for that matter, it would also do something to address the sewage elevation problem, because if I recall correctly, the elevation of this lot is falling from the sidewalk.
It is, it's quite a significant, as John mentioned, it's about 9 feet from the
Yeah,
street
well,
level, right?
Right, they don't give me a elevation of the slab, but yeah, just in general contours, 8 to 9 foot down.
For that matter, you'd probably, in my opinion, you'd probably wind up with a second lot that had a higher value attached to it.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of this is being driven by the applicant. They will remain in the front lot, so they want to have some area there still. I'll certainly talk to them and see if they're amenable to looking at some other
Yeah,
options here.
Tell them what the board said.
Yeah.
The other thing you gotta take into account, Mike, with the one driveway that is shown on the plan, what side is that at? That's on the south side
On
of
the south
house?
side, yeah.
Yeah, we're not supposed to have driveways within 5 feet of the
Right. Yeah.
sidelines.
I wasn't intending
That's
to
right on it.
keep that one as the, I don't think they really use that one. They might park a car there every now and then, I'm not sure. The other driveway's in much better shape than that. That really doesn't really have a surface on it, if you will.
Wow. So the north one must be in really bad shape.
Well, no, the north one's in better shape than the
Oh,
south
the
one.
north one's in better shape.
Yes.
Yeah, the south one needs some.
Yes.
Might as well just be gravel. Yeah, I mean, there's a row of, that's one of those old original houses, there's a row of them there. They gotta be 18 something or other.
Oh, yeah.
Those
It's old.
Federal windows
Yeah.
under the eaves.
It's got a dry basement, though. I was quite impressed.
That's almost a little bit. Yeah, it's unique to Beacon. So you had a question about public hearing. You got a lot of work to do.
I think I know the answer to that now. So we'll address these comments. I'll talk to the applicant and see if there's amenable to some other options. And
Yeah,
we'll
let's work
come
on
back with
this.
something.
Yeah, and look, I'm all for expediency, but not rushing to make mistakes.
Yep.
So, appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we conclude our regular agenda, and we go to two architectural reviews. One is for a new single-family house at 52 Townsend, lot number 7. Good night, Jennifer. Oh, wait, hang on, I'll just sign it right now. So you can take it with you. Good evening. Drive safe, safe home. Thank you. Nope, nope. We're on our own.
You're leaving us alone.
We'll make hay of this by ourselves. Hi, good evening, how are you?
Hi.
So, we got a new home,
New home,
part of your application you've
lot
submitted.
7, which is the end of the cul-de-sac on the right. And I sent you colors, these are the colors.
Yep, Beacon Knolls. You've submitted a picture of a house under construction.
So what we
Is this
did
the
was...
subject house?
You had
From the
asked...
last meeting, when you
Okay.
weren't here.
Oh,
This
So
came
this
up.
is the house that we're requesting. Except it has a full porch on it. These are the colors. That's the colors. You had asked for more of a streetscape so you can see what some of the other houses look like in there.
oh, so I see.
He's basically, he's creating his own context that he's similar or dissimilar from.
Yep.
Right?
I just took some pictures from the street to see what we got there. Thank you. So, let's make it. Yeah.
They're not McManchess. I'm fine with that, but
And then we also included some photos of the individual houses, which,
Yeah. Yeah, it's my only initial observation when looking at this for the first time was, I mean, it's similar in form to one of your other models. The only question I have is this rhythm, why you're going from gray to dark to light, and then especially in this context, why you would go dark and then turn the corner to the gray. It just feels a little weird. But if that's what you really, really want,
Well, that's what Mr. and Mrs. Cox are about. And they did the artwork. These are the colors.
Looks like on one of the other ones, it's the dark color that turns the corner.
yeah.
Right, so it's the-
Varying,
You know, and what I'm noticing is that you're paying attention to that on the front facade, but where, like in this image on lot 13, right? Where you're turning that corner, it's like there's two different things hitting. We're just talking here, you know, and it's a super awkward.
It's weird.
Like, yeah,
I've never
it's
seen,
weird. It's an
honestly, I've
awkward
never seen it
transition.
before. But,
Because it's not the way things are constructed. Usually a porch wraps around a little, or there's an indent or whatever. And it's, the porch itself will be its own thing, right? That's separate from the sidewall, right? Which I get. This is already going on. This is part of.
yeah, look, I
what's
mean,
awkward.
this always comes down to the phrase, there's no accounting for taste. So.
John, you know it's not quite that simple, right?
No, that's what I mean. I mean, it's subject, my point is that it's subjective. I mean,
Sometimes though, when you break rules a little bit, you get interesting things, right?
Yes,
You
that
know,
is also true.
correct?
What's that?
I said sometimes when you break established rules a little bit, you create some interesting points of focus. It's not always necessarily.
That's one way to look at it.
Here's another way to look at it. They're saying that the person buying the home likes this color scheme, right? Meaning even if we say no and they paint it all white or whatever, once the thing's sold, they can just paint it again, right?
No,
So,
this is not, this is not paintable. They could
Right.
change it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look,
It's interesting, but it ends up as kind of almost like an extruded look when the. Would you say when the
I mean, look, it's just my, 35 years of training opinion. It's just odd.
Just.
But is this supposed to be angled? Right, this, no, so. No.
Oh, no, you're talking about the clapboard lines? Or
Yeah.
the siding lines on that?
Yeah, just do me a favor. Don't do that. If you're gonna build it to look like that, just don't.
You're not. They would be horizontal, right? No. They'd be perfectly horizontal. Yeah.
Otherwise,
Just a weird rendering.
I personally think it's just odd, but if the owner likes it, and their neighbors don't mind looking at it,
That would be weird. That would definitely be weird. Disconcerting, this over here.
okay. All right. Any other comments, questions, thoughts?
Well, I really feel that you've
Pleadings.
done this multiple times. I'll keep it, and we've had this discussion a number of times. I'm hoping that the comments we're making are helpful and that they help make your community that you're responsible for a better place. There are differences between a good-looking home and something that's not as considered or thought out, and it's work, and the effort's totally worth it. If John and I both do this work, we are proud of it. And I always want to, you can in fact, you have much more legal flexibility than I think maybe would be wise for you to, exercise in some ways, right? Like there should, you want the highest quality residences visually. It makes no difference in cost. It's the same amount of siding, same amount of materials.
So now that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses up, take a look. And next time we come, I'd be, some critical comments would be appreciated.
Yeah, no,
See them up
look.
in real life rather than.
Yeah, I think it's just really useful and,
Have you ever considered, like, doing some, like instead of extending the siding, is that some what you're, because I guess.
Look, here's the thing, and look, I really don't like to sort of roll out my profession, especially in these instances, because it's not necessarily applicable. What they would be are recommendations, right? And, between myself and Kevin, and you to some degree, you've got nearly 80 years of experience in design sitting here. Offering observations on things that, for example, if your client said, no, this is exactly what I want, honestly, I get it, because I have clients who make really what I would consider, based on my training, poor choices too. So again, without sounding like a complete snob, These are not what I would design or offer to my clients, but that's just an objective, a subjective, and I hope to be as objective as possible viewpoint. But that's as far as I can go at this point. So,
But just to go off that for a second, when this material is extended to the side of the porch roof, and I'm not trying to it'd be too much levity, but it almost looks like you had a bunch of houses that were cut out of a loaf. You know, like there was you could make them in a big row and then just slice them, and you get this, the way all this material is the same, it looks like somebody just cut them in cross-section and...
So what's the alternative? You're saying
I'm saying this triangle,
Yeah.
that triangle, if you change the material there so that the porch remained a distinct
Pull it in,
structure.
pull it out.
yeah.
One or the other. But don't make it that same line, because that line is not the way it actually is. It's actually built as a porch. It's a separate thing. You're creating this, because the way modern construction works is different than traditional, right? People like sheathed planes with abstract materials, you know? Right. They don't think of how they're constructed in 3D with the way that porch roofs would be constructed for waterproofing. It would be a drip edge. You would want that to protect part of the house and extend past and protect you from the sun in some ways. And also, it's a visual and practical part that over years that is a house type that developed, right? And the problem with the house plants, like I said, we're going on and on, but I think it's worth it. The problem with house plans like this is they're not as considered. They aren't architected, right? I really believe in the value of good design. And so you get those little weird things where somebody's only looking at the facade and they're not looking at the 3D object.
It looks like some kind of study of a two-point perspective drawing gone mad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just...
I'm not belittling. I don't want to be snotty or rude, you know, because I think it's something that you guys have been entrusted with, making a whole neighborhood. And these little things, they're small touches, can make a huge difference. Right.
We're learning as we go.
Right.
Yeah, well, so I appreciate that. I mean, look, sometimes it takes years of study of proportionality, scale, materiality, light, shadow, all of those things. The depth of thought and consideration for all those elements, they're just not represented here. But does that make that bad? No, not necessarily. It's just, yeah, when you're community making, you're place making. Again, I'm just speaking from my perspective as someone who observes the environment in a very specific way. There are certain things I look for, and I think intuitively, even non-designers look for those things and subconsciously react to them. And and you know, even to the untrained eye, you can viscerally feel, oh, that resonates with me, or oh, there's something off about that. And that's the impact that the built environment has on us. So that's why myself and Kevin have, I feel a great responsibility for all of that we've sort of gathered in terms of our training experience, trying our best to impart, because it is, to some degree, a public experience. It's a shared experience. That's all I'm getting at. And so short of designing this for you, because that's your charge, that's your responsibility, and short of giving you, you know, a long dissertation on what makes for good design and what some could consider poor design, all we can say is just that there are some slight moves you could consider. That's one of them that we discussed. But beyond that, again, you know, you're responding to your clients, your owners, and again, short of them hearing this, and otherwise it being conveyed to them, there's nothing more that we can do than to say, we hope you would consider these, what I would consider very awkward and unusual change-ups in color. And yeah, I mean,
what's really freaking John out is that if this was a comic book illustration, the facade of this house would be hurtling towards him at incredible speed.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, the
yeah.
main thing
So
we're
that's
trying to do here is see if there is, as a totality, right? The existing structures and the ones that you're proposing are dissimilar or not dissimilar, right? And that was why we asked you to, and thanks for doing this, putting this thing of putting your whole, what you've built so far as a context that now you've created, and now you're putting another building. We can
Yeah.
see whether or not there's a palette that's sort of generally within the same range, right? And you have,
Well
varied
said.
it.
Yeah,
So it's
you've-
not
you've-
too different, it's not too dissimilar. you know?
You've met that,
Not too similar.
you've met that
Yeah.
requirement.
So,
we've said, to some degree, I've said too much.
yeah, I know.
I can't help it. So, but other than that, I appreciate your patience with us, me. I could go on, but I won't. So I'll accept a motion to approve.
Motion.
Motion by David.
Second.
Second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, painful.
We should like better the loaf of bread or the comic.
What?
I said we should like better the loaf of bread or the comic book.
By the way, are you on Facebook? Yeah. Do you get the Beacon Historical Society posts?
Yes.
There was a post today about a tornado with a view of Tyrone.
Thank you.
And I could swear
My
it's of
carriage
your,
house
it's
is
of,
in the back.
it's of
but
your
now
house.
You can't see my house unless it was.
Was this a
If it's the
fundraising
theme-
effort here? Are you
No,
trying to
I'll show you.
solicit-
I'll show you if I can find
I
it.
don't know if that's allowed. You're skirting the ethics here, I
I would
think.
be so excited if there was ever a picture of my house, but I never know what my front gable looked like.
Is this relevant to your application? Okay. So what do we have? And if you could use the mic, sorry.
Just preliminarily, I've represented the Howland Center as an attorney in the past, that was in the past in the representation.
You're representing them now?
No, and the representation at best had a bleak relation.
Are you
to what we're talking
accepting
about
any
now.
monetary current-
I don't see any reason to recuse, but I did want to say on
So,
the record
great.
that fact.
Like pointed out for the record that David Jensen in the past had a relationship, but however, currently does not have any kind of financial relationship whatsoever with the Howland
It
Center.
was never a financial
Oh,
relationship.
okay,
I represented them as an attorney.
You didn't get paid?
Yeah, I got paid.
Oh, it's a financial relationship.
Well, okay, but it,
Professional relationships.
It just, Mike, again, just for the record, it's better because,
For the record, my name is Teresa Kraft. I'm the current president of the
Thank you.
Howland Cultural Center.
and what do you guys,
We are
what are you guys
here
up to?
to get architectural approval for certificate of appropriateness for our portico restoration project.
Okay.
If you were to look at the front of that little brochure that I gave you, that's the current state of the building. We are undertaking a restoration project, and this is what it will look like. Taking it back. Do I need to stand?
Well, again, so we can see
No,
that,
no,
and
no.
no, it's better if, for the record, she's recorded, and that's the whole
I
point
see.
of the mic
Okay,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
So this is only pertaining to the center portico, which is over the door. It's going to start with a new frost wall foundation. That is not built on a foundation. We have one drawing of the building, and it had 3 dormers that didn't even have this portico. So we're not sure if it changed while it was being constructed. We're going to replace the original balcony, repair the bricks using NPS methods. Here's the balcony. To restore the dyed bricks matching the existing materials. We're going to restore the matching supports, exterior painting, new timber hood and supports to match the original design elements. If you look at the front of that little brochure, all of that detail is missing. And the restoration of the windows that are on the portico.
Wow, Jeff Wilkinson's still
So
working?
Jeff Wilkinson is our architect.
He's
and the
still around?
Clemco Construction
Wow.
focuses on out of Westchester, and their main focus is historic preservation and restoration. And we believe we have the ideal team working behind this. We need approval so that we could start ASAP. And, yep, there you go. We submitted a bunch of documents, and we did a shared Google Drive, so if anybody wants access to that, I can give you that. You have the blueprints.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
everything's on file for the portico. We have a buildings conditions report that was done. We received a grant money to do that. We have a
great.
complete blueprints to restore the entire building. There's a lot of work that needs to go on, but we believe if we start at this portico, which is the main structure you walk in, not only is it a main attraction for everybody, but it is a safety thing that we have to do it.
Yep. I commend you for what we were sort of just talking about is respecting great design, and this looks like a pretty, even though it's just the portico, it's a significant restoration.
It goes all the way up to the peak and the pitch
Yeah.
and the spire on the building.
Yeah. I'm pretty much confirming this by my re-review, because I didn't catch it the first time, and it just raised the question when you shared this, but you are bringing back that balcony.
Yes. And all of that decorative detail at the very top, that's all missing.
I have no further questions.
Right.
Unless anyone else does, I'll accept a motion
And
to
everybody knows
approve.
Jeff
Hold on.
Wilkinson.
I do have a comment I
Oh,
wanted to bring
please.
up.
Right.
I noticed something in the drawings that might be missing.
Okay,
On the side view of the porch below.
Right.
It shows like a trifoil type brace.
that's all
Not
going to be
shown.
put back, all the original,
Right, I'm just saying it's not in the drawings, in the section on the side.
on Jeff's drawings.
Yeah, on Jeff's drawings. It's not showing that diagonal brace, which is shown in the photos.
That might be in the entire plan. We have all the blueprints for the entire building, and he separated the portico out. Maybe that is missing.
talking about
But I
this?
don't believe so.
No, just below where the, if you look at.
Right, right.
Yes, A4, those two views.
Right.
There's actually two diagonal brackets that go up.
Right.
Where they meet the porch, where the porch is going.
Right.
Underneath, or, where.
Oh, like in here?
Picks up, yes.
Inside
Right.
here.
Yeah, if you look at the
And it's
photos.
these guys.
Yeah.
It's,
Oh,
it
I
is like
see.
a trefoil.
Right, it's all there.
Yeah, and I
we
didn't
could-
get a chance to look at it.
Okay.
But if it's not there, you may not.
It's overwhelming.
It may be missed on a bid or
missing
something,
on the
unless you
drawing.
have general notes.
Yeah.
Thanks for the note, we'll take a look to make sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, just
Okay.
it's a small thing.
the inboard part of the.
Yeah, no, but commendable. It's a beautiful building, and it's a great, showing great respect for bringing it back.
Yeah. You're gonna
Like
have-
I said, it's an all-volunteer organization.
Yep.
I love this building so much.
Yeah.
Right.
Can't even express it.
We're really lucky that two of the nicest buildings are getting fixed. up.
Exactly, and it's really being appreciated. People are coming from all over the world and actually banging on the doors to come in, which is great.
Many people like to stand out there and take pictures of the building, or they pose their friends in front of it. And what they're doing is documenting the poor condition of this person.
Ah,
So,
So,
After we get it done, I think we'll see a lot more.
yeah.
right.
All right.
One other thing, and I'm so sorry about this. I know, John, you want to get home. There's a plant section of the wood column showing a 4x4 post with trim. D23A, right?
These here?
It's yeah, those columns are shown as built up, rather than, right now, they're solid. They're carved out of solid cedar, I would assume, or some sort of preserved wood. That if you're gonna do that, make sure that they're incredibly careful about how you join, because what
I
happens is
think-
they open up, and
Right.
it will be so sad to see a joint like that
Right.
open up in weather.
If you're not familiar with Jeff Wilkinson, his work is meticulous.
No, I know.
He's
I
all
know.
about historic preservation.
I'm just bringing
Yeah.
up a point that
I'm on this side of the
it's a
street.
very
That's my barn.
high-touch
Right.
location, those columns, or like
Right.
people actually put their hands on them.
Right.
So even like, and I know from my experience that when you build up columns with decorative, right?
Right.
The carving that you have to either reinforce it. I'm sure he'll do a good job. I'm
Right.
just saying it would be something it would be very expensive to do that out of solid wood, the way to recreate it.
Mhm.
But it might be worth it. You might think about it.
Well, if you look at it now, a lot of it is added on pieces.
Right.
Right.
They're called Dutchman
Yeah,
repairs.
Yeah, everybody come look.
Yes, no, I'm totally looking forward to it. I just wanted to contribute if I could.
Okay,
Some things I noticed.
you got that right.
That's a house with some sweet proportions.
Long day.
Really unique.
All right, we're leaving. No, just kidding.
So we have a motion to approve on the table.
We do?
Who created the motion?
No.
I think we were too busy praising.
Certificate of
So,
appropriateness.
motion made by David,
Seconded.
second by Len. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you very
Have a
much.
good
Thank you
night.
so much for your efforts to preserve it.
And with that, motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Len,
Second.
second by Kevin, all in
So
favor?
if one of us votes
Aye.
no, does that mean we can't leave? Just. Aye.
We're in, yes.
Yes, actually, since we're a quorum, everybody needs to agree we're going to leave
Yes.
here.